mistress, isn't she? Fail. 631. Fail.
Fail.
Failed again.
Late.
Ah. That's a fail. Where's that? Oh. Hello. We are broadcasting.
Brum, brum, off we go.
If you say so.
I do.
Okay, good.
I was imitating your Jeep.
Oh.
It sounds just like that.
Yeah.
Sounds nothing like that.
All right. It must have been Dana's party boat then.
Probably the Harley.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Ouch. What was that?
That was Jim
You're an
Carrey.
idiot. Oh.
Okay.
The Grinch.
Well, good time of the year for it.
All right. Maybe if I turn this on, it'll help. Okay, turn off Reaper. And we have that. We have this. I'm going to move this over. I'll leave it there.
Auntie Mary had a canary up the leg of her drawers. When she farted, it departed to a round of applause.
Where do you learn these things?
Well, every time we came into the bar, we used to sing a rude song about 111 Squadron, and that was their usual reply.
Gotcha.
I don't know why. She's followed a fly. Perhaps she'll die.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Well, say hello to the people in the chat room.
Get
Hi,
lost.
Yeah, whatever.
Annoying people. Go away.
We've got
Hi, everybody.
John Jester, Neville Bounds, JS from MSP, guessing.
Go away.
Liz Piper, Lane Street, Mike Kuipers, Mariana, Dave Abbey. I'm missing people, I'm sure.
Oh, John Jester's in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, John. Well, that's a bit keen. Because that
Landon
will
Harvey.
be the early hours.
Arlen S.
Welcome
I'm sure I
anyway,
missed
John.
someone. Sorry.
Captain Jeff is the
Pilot
perfect
Pippin.
muscle relaxant. Well, he's a cure for constipation now.
What?
I'm not sure what that has to do with constipation, but
Sphincter muscles?
Muscle relaxant. It's got to be a cure for constipation. Surely.
I'm not sure what's causing your constipation, but it sounds worse than normal constipation.
Jeff, is your constipation worse than normal?
I enjoy reading the comments in the chat room because it makes me feel better about my life.
Oh, excellent.
Wow.
Just kidding.
New hairstyle. Let's have a look at Jeff's hairstyle.
No, it's not.
Oh, it is. I think it's probably at least an inch higher than normal.
Yeah, sticking up more.
Well,
It's good.
Yeah,
now he's just gonna do this the whole time.
Yeah, lick your hand like this and smear it over. Try that.
I don't want to do that.
Sounds messy.
I'm just gonna have to do.
It looks like a nice tube that a surfer dude would.
Well, I am a Californian, and
yeah, exactly.
I was sort of a surfer dude. I was learning how to be a surfer dude.
And then you got ripped away.
Yeah, I moved to Mobile, Alabama, and I said, "Great, Dad, I could take my surfboard." And he goes, "Well,
you can take it, but
you can take your
nowhere
surfboard.
to put it."
That's true, but yeah,
you can take it down the creek.
Well, no, I mean there was the Gulf of Mexico. It's just the Gulf of Mexico doesn't really have waves.
Oh, that's
I mean, it does sometimes wind-driven waves, but not like the.
No, not like
the Pacific or
Hawaii,
the Atlantic or Hawaii. Hawaii.
Sorry, Hawaii.
Australia. Okay, let's see here. What do I have going on with my channel? Do I have the gate on? That sounds weird. No? Huh. I think my ears are just playing tricks on me today. Okay. Let me make sure that this is not too loud. Oh, it's not loud enough.
Airline pilot guy. WAPG. It's the airline pilot guy. Yeah, he's up in the sky.
How's the volume on that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, hi, Pop. If you're listening to the YouTube version, hi in Australia.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Captain Inkstead.
Yes, Captain Anderson Senior.
That's right.
Western Australia.
I don't know if he listens to the podcast or the YouTube, but anyway, just in case.
Just in case.
Well, I think you covered both your bases there.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay. News, Las Vegas Tower. Out of control, 190. And I'll try to remember all that in the intro.
Interesting news this week.
I can't really write it down on my intro page for some reason.
Paper, use paper.
Yeah, I was going to say they a long time ago, before computers, had this thing called.
All right. Well, I just thought everybody would want me to start.
Get it started, Jeff.
You're late already. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
come on. Thought you said you were supposed to start at 4:30 Eastern. Look what time it is now.
I'm just wondering which of our listeners that is supposed to be.
I actually think it's me.
No. Oh, I remember how to write.
Congratulations.
We'll have a party.
All those years at school, they weren't wasted.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
uh,
And the other one is
I just still laugh at I think it was my 5th grade teacher who was appalled by my handwriting, rightfully so.
you're going to be a doctor, right?
Well, no, it was more along the lines of, when you get to college, you're going to have to write all these papers, and if they can't read your penmanship, they're just not going to grade your papers. Well, guess what happened by the time I got to college? No one wrote
doing it on
anything.
computers.
It's all on computers. Had to be typed.
I'm surprised it wasn't a tick box exam.
Right. Yeah. We had those my entire school career. Scantron machines. Fill in the little bubble.
Oh, dear.
Okay, that's good enough.
Where'd you get
Dear.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
dear. Oh, dear.
Okay. All right.
Dear.
Let's do this thing. What do you think? Oh, wait. Nope. We have to start our recorders and stuff first. Right?
Good point.
Which means
Mine's recording, but I have no idea where the.
still from last week.
That
That would be mine.
would be our Steph.
That would be me. Yeah.
100.
It's not the first time it's happened.
hours.
What do I do with this very large file?
Oh, I've got to put a 9 on this now. Damn.
I don't know. Mine's about a month behind. I'm not even going to try.
Just do it like I do. There's nothing
Blank.
Yeah.
I think this
It's a blank
pen has been on there for so long, though, it doesn't erase anymore. It's just
Oh.
permanently. Oh,
Just
some
like-
of it does,
Just like my brain. It's a blank slate.
but not all of it.
Oh, I don't want these here.
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm ready.
Okay, hang on. I'm not.
Show notes, everything.
Hang on. It's always something extra that I just don't do.
Always something there to remind me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like singing, but different.
That off. That off. That off.
It sounds like my shutdown checks.
Mono.
Off.
Off.
Channel 3.
Get off.
Channel
Time to go.
5.
Yep.
And channel stereo 1, 2. Okay. Arm. Record arm. say something, you all?
Peter Piper, Pit to Peck, a pickle
All
pepper.
right.
I
Thank
can't compete with that.
And I'm going to.
Ivor's here, all the way from California. Yay.
Okay, so now I am recording. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Now you're just not waiting to hear my clack before you do yours, right?
No.
Okay,
I
good.
was so far behind you. Like I thought I was actually just slow. No? I don't know.
Good
You know
again.
what? Honestly, it doesn't really matter that much. I adjust it. I tweak it anyway, regardless of where the clack mark is. So I don't even know why we do it. It's just kind of fun, I guess. Okay. Now I think let me make this window a little bit smaller so it doesn't use so much CPU. Okay. And here we go, I think.
WAPG. It's the Airline Pilot Guy.
Airline Pilot Guy, episode 349.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1A at APG headquarters. Today's show was recorded on the 14th of November, 2018.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy. Would you ride and it's flying by with the Airline Pilot Guy.
In today's show, what happened last week at Las Vegas Tower? An ERJ 190 goes out of control, and 737 MAX feature was kept a secret from the pilots.
What, you didn't like it?
Not satisfied. Have a swig of beer. Take 2.
I ran out of time. I
Oh.
took too long.
Oh, dear.
I'll just do the first 2 then, and then do the rest. Hang on, my son is messaging me about his cracked iPhone.
Oh.
Oh.
Dad, do we have AppleCare on my phone?
No.
No, yours is the only one that doesn't have it. Don't ask me why, but no. I said, just go ahead and take it and have it fixed. It's not going to matter. I can't take it with me, right?
What, the money that it costs to fix
the
it?
money.
Yeah.
You can, you know.
I mean, you know.
Well, I mean, you could.
Yeah,
That'd be
just
weird, though.
keep putting it in the collection plate. It'll be waiting for you on the other side.
I was going to say, just
Right.
line the suit that you in dollar bills.
That
Yep.
would be a
Take it
monumental
with
waste, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Now I have to belch. That's my beer that I just took a swig of. Well, that was not a good idea. All right, here we go.
WAPG. It's the Airline Pilot Guy.
Airline Pilot Guy, episode 349.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1A at APG headquarters. Today's show was recorded on the 14th of November, 2018.
Yeah, he's up in the sky. It's the Airline Pilot Guy. Would you ride and it's flying by with the Airline Pilot Guy.
In today's episode, we have an ERJ 190 out of control. What happened last week at the Las Vegas Tower? More news, your feedback, and this week's plane tale, gone for a burden. So get all settled in. Tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 349 is ready for pushback. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. It's an aviation podcast where we cover aviation news and your great feedback. And here with me this week to help me in that endeavor is from her lakeside studio in South Carolina. She's a doctor, skydiver, marathon runner, strength training junkie, IPA connoisseur, and commercial multi-engine instrument-rated pilot, Dr. Steph.
Hey, Captain Jeff. Glad to be back with you for another wonderful episode of this great podcast. Looking forward to it. Some good things to discuss this week.
All right. And also joining us from his recording studio in the English countryside, professional photographer, former RAF, RAAF fighter pilot, current captain for an international airline based in London, Captain Nick.
Well, hi there, Jeff, and hi there, Steph, in the background. You know, it's halfway through November already. Where is the year going?
Wasn't it just January? Pretty sure.
Yeah.
I know. It's amazing how the time flies. Well, thank you, Kevski in Norway, for that music that we always play for Captain Nick's introduction, and also the ER Dr. Steph theme by the one and only Neville Bounds. We do appreciate that, and just don't say that enough, how much we appreciate all of your support, whether it be creatively, like people sending in audio for us, or feedback, or financial support, which we'll talk about in a bit. Thank you, one and all. So, how is everybody doing this week?
Can't complain.
Yeah,
You can.
awful, thanks.
Oh, okay.
Say awful.
I think so. Yeah. All right.
Well, it was trying to get home from America. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think, why don't we, I'm sure you'll say something about that here when we catch up with, well, let's just go right into it. Captain Nick, what are you talking about?
Well, I was recently out in New York at Newark, and I had a lovely day with Radio Roger. A bit more of that to come. And we pitched up back at the airport, and the damned airplane was broken. So for those of you who are Patreons, I've done a fairly long crew log, which explains all the technical and fascinating details of how and what happens when your airplane won't work. Suffice to say, we couldn't get it going, so we retired back to the hotel and had another go the next night. Very nicely, the company didn't give me the same airplane. They flew a fresh one out, and some other poor sucker had to fly my broken machine home. So I got home a day late. So that's all crammed everything up a little bit. I was a bit short of time to get the plane tail done and everything else done. But there you go.
A day late and $1 short,
Exactly.
as we like to say, or a pound short. Is that what you say? And
That doesn't quite roll off the tongue the
No,
same way there.
we don't have that expression.
oh, okay.
Hmm.
Probably best that you don't.
Yeah.
So did you say Radio Roger?
I'm Radio Roger, and you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show.
Thank you, Radio Roger, for that.
What is he in the toilet with a
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Permanently part of the collection.
Excellent. Yeah, had a great time with him, seeing him do his job as a professional anchorman.
Well, it's just a shame that you didn't do any kind of a special audio recording to reflect that visit to his place of work.
Well, I have a feeling the spy in the cab might have done it for me.
Oh, well, let's see if I can find something here. Oh, look at this. I found an audio file. Should I play it?
Oh, go on then.
15 minutes past the hour, live from America's news headquarters. I'm Roger Stern. Here's what's happening. President Trump is in Paris meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron. And there are tensions over how much Europe...
For
can pay.
APG News, this is Nick Anderson. I'm here in the studio interviewing the amazing anchorman, Roger Stern. Roger, it's great to be talking to you, and thank you very much indeed for talking to our APG audience.
It's great to be talking to them. I hope I can sound coherent. Doing an hour at a time, it sort of exhausts you. It's a little bit like working on an assembly line, keeping the news moving. We broadcast over Sirius XM satellite and do all news 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And anchors here have 1 hour on, 1 hour off. And during that off hour, they get to catch their breath and prepare for the next newscast and keep it fresh and updated as events take place.
And tell me, of course, you're an APG listener and have been for many years. With your fantastic setup, and I'm so impressed with the professionalism that you display on air and the gear. Have you got any hints for Captain Jeff?
You know, I have to tell you, I think Captain Jeff is a real natural. I mean, he sounds conversational. He is a great communicator. No, I don't. I mean, he's really very smooth on the air and is himself, which is the most important thing to do. And what Jeff does is terrific. And I know he has a new, set of music and he uses it well. So no, I really don't.
We think Jeff should come up and visit you and get a few pointers.
I'd be happy to host him. I'm not sure what I tell him to do. He seems to have figured that out very well on his own.
I must admit, though, looking at the gear you have in your studio here, I don't think he'd be able to fly around the country and broadcast from hotels if he had to carry this. In fact, I'm not sure the Mad Dog would even get airborne with all this gear.
There is a lot. I mean, there are several computers here. We have one computer that handles the formats going into commercials, playing what we call the jingles or the sounders, another computer playing the pieces of sound we have in the newscast, excerpts of people like President Trump or reporters. So it's a pretty big, sophisticated operation.
It is, and I'm so impressed with the way you handle it. I mean, you must have been doing this for years.
Yeah, and a lot of when you go to a different station and learn a different format, it's really muscle memory. It's a lot like flying. I mean, you just have to sort of do it and learn it. I mean, the big difference is if I make a mistake, no one is in danger. I mean, you might have a few seconds of dead air, but everyone survives.
But dead air is dreadful, is it?
It is. But that's the other difference. We have to make decisions very quickly. I guess you in flying, your decision time is a little more elongated. In most cases, you can take 10, 20, 30 seconds to make a decision.
Well, yeah, I have to say, my father always asked me a trick question. He said, if you have an engine failure, what's the first thing you do? And I'd dream up all these actions. And he said, no, the first thing you do is sit back and light a cigarette. Which was really his way of saying you don't rush into things because that's the way you make mistakes.
And there have been a number of accidents where people have not really thought it out and not spent time evaluating their situation. I know that because I listened to the APG.
Exactly. Brilliant. Now, because not all your time is here in the studio. In fact, a lot of it is out doing field reporting around New York. That must be exciting.
That's what I like best. This is very much like being a ringmaster or working on an assembly line and being on top of a lot of stories, which is not my strong suit. I like to be able to focus on one story at a time, talk to people, gather what we call sound, and really kind of craft it. Here, there's a whole team and a wonderful team that does this, but I like very much being in control of the whole product, and I can do that more when I'm in the field.
Which is very much sort of in your car with laptops and microphones and meeting people on the street and trying to do it all, a one-man band.
Exactly. I mean, the equipment is not particularly different from what a lot of people have. I have a laptop. I have a microphone with a digital recorder. We have some apps that allow us to go live over the cellular data network. But other than that, it's very much off-the-shelf equipment. And yeah, I'm a one-man band. I have a board that fits over my steering wheel that creates a little desk. I put my laptop on it, and I just sort of huddle down in the car. And after I've talked to people or covered press conferences, I just sort of start banging it out on my laptop.
That's brilliant. Now, just thinking back over the last few years, you're a huge career as a reporter and a journalist. What's the story that you always look back on and think that was brilliant? I did a really good job doing that, and that was a fascinating story to tell.
Earlier in my career, I was in a position where I could really focus on beats. A lot of what I do now is general assignment reporting. So it was covering politics on Long Island, covering the fight over a nuclear plant that was eventually closed. And I liked that because I could really sink my teeth into a story and cover it day after day after day where I really knew the story. A lot of what I do now is arrive at things, covering stories for the first time, and there's a real premium on being able to figure things out quickly. And I like that challenge. But I kind of miss being able to cover something regularly and really know it backwards and forwards.
Well, that's fantastic. By the way, I must say, I love your voice. When you're on air, you have such a precise and imposing delivery. I think it's fantastic.
I wish I could sound like that in normal life. I don't.
I bet we all do. Okay, brilliant, Roger. Look, thanks very much indeed. I'm going to hand this back to Jeff on the APG. Been great chatting to you.
Oh,
Oops. What was I saying?
Were you talking about professional journalism on
Yeah,
radio
I
just
know.
before that happened? Yeah.
Great chatting to you. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me up to your studio.
You're quite welcome. It's a pleasure having you.
Thanks. We'll fix it in post.
nothing to hear there.
Despite the little hiccup,
I can
which
guess what happened there.
Roger's going to be giggling about that, I'm sure.
Well, it's not going to be in the audio only version. That's for sure. So now you should start talking as if it never happened.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic. That never happened, Jeff.
You're not helping at all.
No, I'm not. Anyway,
You-
look, that was fantastic meeting Roger. He really is a lovely setup there. The people there were very friendly, and I was drooling at the quality of his audio equipment. I nearly just said equipment there, but I'm glad I put the
Good
audio
catch.
bit.
Good
Yeah,
catch.
exactly
thank you
right.
for clarifying that.
And he was writing copy right in front of me, and then rushing off to a little side booth to record pieces for someone else to put into their bulletins. And he only had like 60 minutes, having come off the air to prepare the next hour's news, which he did with producers and people around. But it was pretty nonstop, and it's all looked very slick. But I can just see how testing it is to be able to do that kind of audio work in the professional environment. So thank you very much, Roger. It was a delight to get to see you at work.
Yes, and thanks for recording this copy.
I'm Radio Roger, and you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show.
We're going to use that a lot.
Yeah.
We
Brilliant.
appreciate that.
Brilliant.
Great
Brilliant.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I do want to have a tour of his facility as well.
Yep.
His audio studio, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. And then, yeah, I'll take as many tips as I can get from. Oh, that's not good either. I should have said that. Anyway, Steph, what have you been up to?
Well, first I'll just say to Roger, because I'm sure he's listening, but Jeff was, you did make him blush a little bit with the high praise and compliments. So that was fun to see, and very well deserved compliments, I should say.
Wow.
I'm doing great. Not much going on here. Had a kind of a quiet, relaxing weekend. Just kind of recovering from recent travel, and I guess as much as I hate to even say it, get ready for the holidays. Not that I've done anything to get ready for it, but kind of in denial that next week is Thanksgiving, and then, gosh, probably just straight into Christmas stuff.
Mentally and emotionally prepared. That's a big part
Yeah,
of it, right?
I need a whole week to, work on that before we get into the holiday season.
I've not heard any Christmas music yet, which is a good thing.
Ugh, you're lucky.
Oh, you have, I guess. Oh, well.
Yeah, not by choice, fortunately. I mean, no, I think Christmas music is great on Christmas Day.
I like it. I like it throughout the Christmas season, which is actually just starts on Christmas Day. But don't get me started with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, all right. Any meetups or any audio files for me to play or anything like that?
I got nothing.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, just a reminder of the 27th of this month at the Circus Brewery in Berlin. I know we're going to have some of our German listeners there, which is going to be fantastic. So looks like it'll be a great evening.
I wish I could be there.
Yeah,
and,
great place. And, you guys are going to have a ton of fun. The beers are excellent.
we
also.
will. Oh, thank you. We may even get Fred there. I don't know. Might happen. You know, Fred, like man of mystery.
That wouldn't be any surprise, would it?
No,
Really?
He's like a bad penny, but a very nice bad penny. It keeps turning up.
Oh boy. Well, yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun, I can tell. So for me, last Thursday, I guess the day after we did the recording, I managed to get myself over to the Atlanta Control Tower for an Atlanta Tower tour. And that was a lot of fun, very informative. I almost didn't make it in time because of not accounting for the traffic at that time of morning. I thought it wouldn't be so bad, getting close to lunchtime. And then, of course, missing the train that I should have gotten. And then the train that I was on, of course, had some mechanical troubles again. And that only happens when you're, running late. And then I had to go from one end of the airport to the other end of the airport because the control tower is on the near the international terminal. But I managed to make it and enjoyed the tour. We were there from 12 to 3 o'clock and had a lot of questions answered from pilots. There were probably a group of about 25, maybe 30, but maybe 20 to 25 as best I can recollect of us Acme pilots there. And we went up into the control tower cab itself after we had a briefing from 3 of the senior controllers. And I was amazed at how, this is the world's busiest airport, and this tower is the 3rd tallest in the world, second to a couple in Asia, and then Atlanta Tower is number 3. And then I think there are 2 other towers in the top 10 in the U.S., Indianapolis and Orlando, I think.
I was listening to your crew log about it, and not to brag about size or anything, but there's a new control tower being built here in Charlotte, and I think it'll be the 2nd tallest in the U.S. once it's completed.
Okay, yeah, I believe
Presumably behind Atlanta.
392 feet, I think, is the Atlanta tower height. And so when you get up there and you start looking out the window and you look, and then you kind of look over the edge of the windows looking down, you're going, wow, this really is way up. And then when you look at the whole layout of the international airport and you can see every inch of the airport, all the runway surfaces and everything else, and it encompasses quite a large geographic area. That was impressive. But the odd thing about it is because you're up there 31 stories high, when you're watching airplanes take off and taxi around, it looks like they're models. It doesn't even look like they're real. It just has that sensation that this is not real. This is not really. And then the control, it's very quiet up there. I mean, I was thinking that it was going to be noisy and I could hear people, shouting commands to all the pilots and stuff in there. And it was like, you can't hear it. It's like you can hear a pin drop. They're wearing these little microphones, that or they have the little earpiece and then a little tiny microphone off the side of their mouth, and then they're just speaking in normal conversational volume. And unless you get up like within a couple of feet of them, then you can finally hear them talking.
Well, that's so odd, Jeff, because every time I speak to an American air traffic controller, he screams at me.
Well,
must be good microphones.
I think that might be just you, Nick.
Could be. Could be, I suppose. Yeah, possibly.
Anyway, I really enjoyed the tour. Again, I made it a crew log for those who are part of our Coffee Fund cadre. So that's one of the benefits, the perks of financially supporting the show. And so if you do join us in the Coffee Fund cadre, please check out my tour of the Atlanta Tower. And hey, we have feedback. So we have an email box or email address, but we also have snail mail. And I received, I don't know if you guys can see my pictures there. I had to put it in a separate note under snail mail, but I have the item right behind me, I believe. Hang on. So I got an email from David Shore, and he said that he was disappointed that I called in sick for my trip because on the return from Toronto to Atlanta, he was going to be on my flight, and he was going to give me this nice little souvenir. It's a ball cap, and it's emblazoned with the Toronto Maple Leafs logo, and then on the right side, it has a personalized embroidered bit of logo or whatever. It says APG, Captain Jeff. So
who's Captain Jeff?
No, it's Jeff.
Oh, okay.
Put your glasses on.
I just wanted to make you look.
Okay. Yeah. Wait a minute. It is Captain Jeff. No, that's okay. I'll go by Captain Jeff if I need to. But anyway, thank you, David, for sending that to the snail mail box, the P.O. Box, 2191, Roswell, Georgia, 30077. And if you want to send us souvenirs or whatever, that's the address. It's found on the airlinepilotguy.com website. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
And
very nice.
I don't think I have anything else to talk about. My shingles virus, I think, is starting to let up. I still have little pains here and there, but that's to be expected. And I think I had a relatively mild version of shingles anyway to begin with. So
that's good to hear.
yeah, so I'm pretty much back to normal.
Good
Except for
job.
they're still there, and it's still a little bit of pain here and there, but whatever. I can live. And anything else before we move on?
I think so.
Okay.
No, just should we mention Dana's actually off flying?
Oh,
Did we
yeah.
talk about that?
Dana told us to tell you that he says hi and that he couldn't make it. He was called out on a trip, and I think he left yesterday. He's been flying in this really cruddy weather, as I had been the last few days as well. And a lot of rain, a lot of high gusty winds, low visibilities, low ceilings. And it's just raw weather out there. Not a lot of fun to fly in. And so we feel for you, man. We wish that you could have been here with us, but unfortunately, he's flying a later shift, and he's flying right now, so he couldn't be with us today. But thank you for reminding me, Steph, to say hi for Dana.
Sure thing.
All right. And with that, I think now we'll go to the coffee fund.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
No thanks.
I love coffee. I love tea.
I love the APG community.
Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup.
Oh, yeah. The Coffee Fund is your way, dear listener, to become involved in our show in a financial way. Of course, we always recommend that you don't send us anything. If you need your money for food, shelter, what else? Clothing, flying lessons, that stuff, that important stuff. But if you have the resources available to you to help us in supporting the show, please check us out at airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And we have a couple different ways to do that. We have the Classic Fund, which is a PayPal thing where you can do a one-time donation or a recurring donation. And the other thing is Patreon, and you can become a patron of the show, and you give a certain amount per episode. And since the last show, we have a new executive producer, G-Man Glaucus. And so welcome, Glaucus, to the Coffee Fund cadre. We do appreciate that. So again, check out airlinepilotguy.com/coffee if you're interested in becoming part of the Coffee Fund cadre. Thank you very much.
Stand by for news.
And speaking of the devil, I just happened to look over on our Hangout screen, our live streaming video, and I see somebody walking and doing a little hand wave.
Do you think his ears were burning?
It may have been. And so Dana, go ahead and take it off and mute if you. Oh, he can't. He must be in a public place, and he can't talk right now. So when he can, well, we're just going to have to wait for him to get to a place where he can talk, because this first news item is going to be something I don't want to interrupt. And
Good. Can I
play some? Pardon?
Take a brief break then too.
Okay.
Back in like
Take a break.
seconds.
Take a break.
All right.
And in the meantime, let's see. Oh, look at that. He's such a good-looking guy in that uniform. Where's your hat? Put your hat on.
Put your trousers on as well.
Oh, gosh, yes. This is not a porno.
He's taken after Jeremy.
I guess Dana must be one of those no-hat guys. That's sad.
Well, he just tucks it under his arm.
Oh, he's holding it. Yeah, that's good. It's a lot easier just to hold it than to put it on your damn head.
No, because I don't want my logo all splattered all over the
Oh, good point. Okay, I take it all back.
I'm smart like that.
All right. Yeah, I didn't remember you being a no-hat guy when we flew together before.
All right, guys, saw you.
Hey, so where are you?
Yeah, I'm losing you guys.
Oh, no. Where are you?
I'm on the jetway.
Okay. In ATL?
Thanks again. You're welcome. Yeah, I'm in the ATL, just stepping into the flight deck.
Oh,
right
there you go.
now. And yeah, been a fun so far. It's been good. So I'm having fun. I get a great FO. And sorry I'm missing the show. I just wish I could be there, but can't be there because I'm out here working, flying in all this wonderful El Crapo weather. It's been fun.
Yeah, I was talking about that. In
Pretty
fact,
gross.
we were explaining why you weren't here with us today and that you were
probably
flying.
breaking up. Talk to you.
Okay. See ya, Dana. Well, that was fun. See, that's the reason why you should watch the video, because that is not going to be in the audio podcast. All right. All right, here we go.
Ground Frontier Flight Level 42, spot 1. Tower Alaska 608.
Alaska 608.
Your radio is coming in broken and unreadable. Say again for Alaska 608.
Alaska 6. Frontier sends.
Frontier 1142 is our spot 1. You're coming in broken. Tower Alaska 608, short final 1 left.
Place. Careful. So good.
Exit Flight 6 through Justin Pass, 3,270. We have Romeo.
Careful. It's go here. Radar contact. Code the land.
Somebody up there that knows what they're doing.
Second. Yeah, go ahead. Careful at 6. Landing at possible was GERD. Enter Las Vegas crossfire. Yes. Clear to enter Las Vegas crossfire. Yes, continue. What's called?
Ground Frontier Flight 1142, spot 1. Tower Hawaii Navy, holding short of 1 right on mic. Tower Hawaii Navy, do you have anybody else up there?
Hawaii Nation, be sent by.
United 448, spot 7 to taxi.
448, sent by.
Tower Alaska 608.
Alaska 608, stand by. United 448, Los Vegas Friends. Runway 26 right, taxi to Charlie.
26 right, Charlie, United 448.
United 448, Charlie, Bravo 4, Bravo Delta, cross runway 26 right.
Charlie, Bravo 4, Bravo, cross 26 right, United 448.
And who was the call?
One right, or Delta 35.
Hawaii 19 Heavy, You said you need to cross?
Affirmative. We're holding short 1 right on Mike for Delta 35.
Oh, Hawaiian 18 Heavy cross 1 wheel right. Taxi via Delta Golf Charlie.
Delta Golf Charlie, cross 1 right for Delta 35, Hawaiian 18 Heavy.
Thank you. Last call.
Hello, Alaska 608. We're behind the Hawaiian Heavy, holding short 1 right at Mike.
Alaska 608, cross 1 right. Taxi via Delta Golf Charlie.
Clear to cross 1 right and taxi via Delta Golf Charlie, Alaska 608.
United 448, you gave us taxi instructions to 26 right. Do you want us to go to 1 right?
United 448, runway 1 right, taxi via Charlie. Bravo 4, Bravo Delta, cross 126 right.
Hey, Charlie 4 Bravo, 4 Bravo Delta, cross 26 right, going to 1 right, United 448.
Thank you.
It's our United 1675. I'm sorry, 1765. We're short of 26 left, or 26 right on Alpha 6 right across.
United 1765, cross my 26 right. Turn right on Charlie, taxi to the ramp.
Okay, cross 26 right on Charlie, taxi to the ramp for United 1765. Any traffic in the area, please advise we're crossing 26 right.
Absolutely. United 448, give way to company at Bravo 6 or Alpha 6.
Give way to company, 448. Frontier 1142, it's spot 1.
Frontier on the 262.
Frontier 1142, it's spot number 1.
Frontier 1142, also big bus ground standby.
Tower American 2785, visual approach 26 left.
American 2785, also is tower runway 26 left, close land.
26 left, third land, American 2785. Everybody holds short of 1 right, we're number 1. We're a little concerned about this, so we're kind of waiting it out.
Sprowings 1069, you're concerned about what?
Frontier 262 is holding short of 1 right.
Sprowings 1069, just stand by on our spot.
I'm sorry, say again for Spirit 1069.
Sprowings 1069, stand by on our spot.
Okay, I think you're saying to stay here on spot 15.
Sprowings 1069, affirmative. Stand by on spot 15.
Ramp, spare wings at 1069.
Go ahead.
I hate to ask you this, but
Do you have a supervisor?
Go ahead.
Take a tower, Care Flight 6, landing assured Valley Hospital.
Okay, so.
Be careful out there.
Thank you.
Something's wrong. Tower American Belt 2785 cleared at Alpha 6, holding short of
13760, runway 1 right, clear to go.
Say that again.
Frontier 762, runway 1 right, clear to go.
Okay, confirm it's Frontier 262, clear for takeoff, 1 right.
Sorry, Frontier 262, runway 1 right, clear to go.
Frontier 262. Tower American 2785, holding short of 26 flight at Alpha 6.
Thank you.
Clearance, Korean Air 006.
Korean 006 Heavy, go ahead.
We have departure clearance, but we need runway 26 left, correction, 26 right due to performance.
Danger 6, yeah. Departure 127.9. Korean 06 Heavy 127.9.
1279er, Korean Air 006.
Tower American 2785, holding short of 26 flight, are we cleared to cross?
You said 2685?
2785, holding short of 26 flight at Alpha 6.
One more time. What was your call?
American 2785, holding short.
American 2685, cross runway 268, ground point 1.
Okay, cross 26 right at Alpha 6, American 2785.
Correct. American 2685, cross runway 268, ground point 1.
Ground point 1, American 2785. Verify United 448, cleared to cross 26 right on Delta.
And then 448, sorry, cross runway 26 right, Delta, ground point 1. Sorry, United 448, cross runway 26 right, ground point 1.
Ground point 1 you want us to go to?
Yes, United 448, cross runway 26 right, ground point 1.
Anyone on this frequency, if you need to talk to me, just call ramp 279. Be better.
Cross runway 26 right, ground point 1. Sorry, I'm choking a little bit. United 448, cross runway 26 right, ground point 1.
Hey guys, this is American 1084. Come up 131.77.
Anybody else on one right? Do you hear United 448?
Loud clear. It's Frontier 760 short, number 1.
Okay, yeah, somebody's checking with the tower up there. I think American Operations is. There's something going on up there.
And the upbound aircraft, this is Spirit 1069 on the ground here in Las Vegas. Something.
Tower American 1084.
I know you guys are working on.
And everybody on the tower thing is United 448. We just had our ops people go ahead and they're sending medical and police up there to see what's going on. We're behind American, right? We're about number 4. We're just going to shut down here.
Yeah, it sounded like we had a hot mic there for a while on the tower. It sounded like somebody walked in to ask her if she was okay.
Yeah, everybody just stand by one. I'm taking over now. I'll be right back with you.
Thank you.
Everything okay up there? It's good there.
Yes, very difficult to listen to. That was last Wednesday, late evening, around 11 something local time, 11:30 p.m. And you hear at the beginning of the audio, you know, she's starting to make little mistakes here and there with the clearances, and then not keeping the microphone pushed down all the way for all the transmissions, and then it just starts getting worse. At times, it sounded like she was laughing, and other times crying. You know, coughing, and a lot of people have said that this seems consistent with an episode of a stroke. And I'm not sure. I think maybe Dr. Steph, you may have some information regarding more regarding her health situation. But
Well, it occurred to me that I hadn't seen anything recently. You know, there was a lot of news about this when it first happened, and that was, you know, a week ago at this point, correct?
yes,
Wednesday?
a week ago.
So I did a quick search actually before we started today, and did come up with a more recent article from the Las Vegas Review Journal, actually I think by the Associated Press, that was published yesterday. And interesting information in here. There's no confirmation of what happened to this controller, but it does say that she resigned on Sunday, and officials have not identified the controller or said what caused her to slur words during a 40-minute span, and that she subsequently became incapacitated. So not a whole lot of information, but interesting that she quit or resigned because of the incident.
Right. Now, that audio snippet, I really cut a whole bunch of stuff out because, as you just mentioned, 40 minutes or so worth of audio recording this incident and how she was kind of going downhill. And then toward the end, we hear the controller that was on break coming up to relieve her and realizing that something was wrong. And he said, "Are you okay? Or are you all right?" And then all of a sudden you hear his voice. He is now saying, "I'm taking control." And then I cut out the last portion of the audio recording where he is just starting to, go into normal controller mode, spitting out instructions and getting everything back to normal. And it was just a night and day comparison to the way she was controlling things. And, we had several of you send in questions regarding this. What would you do in this situation? Would you accept any of these clearances? And, it's almost as if you have to treat this as a non-towered field at this point, where you'll note that some of the flights, some of the pilots out there were saying on the frequency what they were doing. Hey, we're crossing. Anybody here on the frequency? We're crossing runway 26 right at A6. So be aware. And yeah, what a situation. And then there was somebody coming in, a few airplanes coming in on final that never got clearance to land. I don't know if they landed anyway or if they went around. I didn't hear any of that on the frequency.
Yeah, I'm not sure entirely what happened there. And again, most of that audio is there, but sometimes when you have those live ATC clips, you miss some things, some transmissions. So the going back to that last article that I was looking at, it does say that 5 inbound aircraft remained airborne. So I guess they did go around or go back to.
They probably went back to approach
the other
control and said,
frequency,
"Hey,
yeah.
I don't know what's going on there, but
I can't get clearance to land,
something
and
doesn't sound right."
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably I'll get your guys' input on that for sure, but that's what I would have.
One of the
thought
interesting
to do.
things is when she cleared United across 26 right on the way out to 1 right, and then she said, after you cross 26 right, contact ground point 1. Well, that's something that she would instruct airplanes to do if they were coming in, if there was more than one person up in the tower
Right.
in the ground control position. But she was ground control and
Right.
she was tower control. And that's why the United guy says, point 1, you want us to go to ground, point 1? And, everybody was going, yeah, something is not right here.
Yeah.
Poor
Well, I mean, we
Korean
have a
Air.
lot of I'm sorry?
Poor Korean Air.
I know.
They were, trying to get clearance for the longer runway, and then she sent them to 127.9, which is the east ramp control frequency.
Interesting.
So, things are somewhat confusing for them anyway, because this is not their native language. They're probably going, what? Why are we
What's
on
going on?
ramp control? We don't normally get, clearance on ramp control. Anyway, you could almost tell that she didn't really understand that she was coming across the way she was. It was
Yeah,
like she thought she
absolutely. I
was
mean,
normally, communicating.
so I think I have a lot of thoughts about what might have been going on here. We have a lot of good questions here from listeners. I don't know if you want to go through that because we might address a lot of that in the course of answering some of their questions. Maybe
Feel
make
free.
it. Oh, okay. So let's start with Nicholas here. He's the first one, I think. So he's basically the one asking, what would the crew do in this situation? I would think the safer option would be to remain at the gate if already there, park out of the way if already taxiing, go mist and back to approach if inbound. It's pretty clear that no flight crew would be confident in the safety of tower instructions. Would a crew be required to declare an emergency on frequency in order to deviate on any instructions on the ground or in the air? So I'm going to start with those two for.
Nick, what's your input?
This is such an unusual situation that I don't think any of us have a definitive answer on this, because it's the first time in my entire career I've ever heard of it happening. And of course, I've looked back at events in the past of interest, and I've got a few years flying under my belt as well. So this is such a one-off. I think you're going to make it up as you go along. And I think you just do the safest thing for your aircraft. So unless you're absolutely certain you've got a valid landing clearance and that the controller issuing it is fully compos mentis, I wouldn't land. I'd go around and, as the guys did, go back to approach and try and find out what's going on. I think if you were on the ground, you would do as some of the guys did, which is hold short of the runway. So I'm not taking off until I know what's going on. Some guys continue to taxi. They made their own calls to broadcast that they were crossing runways and things. But I think the best thing to do is just sit on your hands if you can. If you're on the ground, do nothing. If you're airborne, then obviously you're in a slightly more difficult situation, because if you're short on gas, you're probably going to have to head straight off to a diversion. If you're not, then you can afford to hang around and wait for the situation to be resolved, as ultimately it did. But it took an inordinately long time, and I think that's going to be something that the FAA will be very concerned about.
Absolutely. Yeah, as you say, same thing, same answer. It depends on the situation. It's easy now to look back at it and say, well, this is what I would have done. But if you're in there in the moment, the best thing to do, I think, is to just stop the operation, and as many of the pilots did, and see what was going on, because many people said that they were concerned about what was happening there.
Sure, and I'm going to kind of skip ahead to Josh's question here too, because he asks about. He says, "I'm interested by some of the pilots' decisions to call their respective companies. I think a lot of them did realize that this controller was having a serious problem, trying to figure out how to get help there, and trying to figure out the most expeditious way to do it. Is that something you guys would be able to do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's something I'd probably definitely do.
Well, we
Contact
all have phones. We just pick it up and dial 911, or speak to your company. That's probably the best thing. They've got better communications. You're quite right. But on some of these towers, one guy on break, he might even be having a snooze. One lady up actually actively controlling in the tower. You may not be able to get access to the building. Because I remember there was one incident of a controller falling asleep, and the security guard that was walking around realized he was asleep, because everyone was calling him and he wasn't replying. And he spent ages banging on the side of the control tower trying to get in to wake him up, and without success. So, it seems to me that there is a certain level of manning below which you cannot afford to come. And in addition, if you're going to be the only person in the tower, shouldn't they, even if you're on break, perhaps you shouldn't even be listening to what the guy or the controller above you is saying, so that if all of a sudden they do faint, stop talking, there's some problem, you might get a clue and dash up there and sort things out, but it appears not.
Good point. Like like Radio Rogers radio studio, I bet they have speakers all over the place, and in offices and everything else, where they're monitoring what is on air, because as you mentioned in your
everyone's listening to what's going on. So if all of a sudden there's a glitch and Roger's mic stops working or something, they pick up on it straight away.
Yeah, that dead air is death in the radio world.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Seems like a simple solution to these types of problems. Few and far between as they are. Nick goes on, he says, "What are Dr. Steph's thoughts? Do you think this controller was capable of giving even the most basic instruction with confidence? There was no conflict. Does a person in this situation have the ability to realize something is wrong? I'm thinking she was unaware because she had access to a crash phone that would surely lead to immediate help." That's from Nick in Las Vegas. Yeah, so, listening back on it, trying to think of the possible reasons for why she might have been acting and speaking the way that she was. A lot of people have brought up concerns about, was she having a stroke? Was she having a transient ischemic attack? There's other things that come to mind too as potential reasons for why someone would act like that or speak like that. Certain types of seizures can cause that type of speech pattern, and may not cause the person to even realize that they have a problem. Certainly, very rare catastrophic things, brain tumors can produce that type of a speech pattern. Medications, side effects, if you're taking a new medication and it affects you poorly. And then certainly, drugs, alcohol, you have to consider all of those things. And I don't know what the answer is to what she had. We don't have that information.
No, and to a certain extent, it's medical incompetence. So perhaps we shouldn't, but we may find out through the FAA in the future. But I'm a little distressed to hear that she may have resigned, because, of course, people will then point the finger. Whereas, of course, if she remained in employment, she might well be receiving treatment with the possibility of coming back to work. So I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, that was the strange thing for me. It doesn't make sense. If someone had a serious medical event, typically that's not a reason for them to resign several days later from their job. That's not usually what you see. I know there's been some differing thoughts in the chat room about this, and I'll just leave that at that. But typically, if someone's had a major medical event, that's usually to some extent the press or whoever's giving the news conference related to it, the FAA or whoever's in charge, will probably give some indication that that's what's happened or something along those lines without giving any specifics or details. But when there's no information about it and when it's just a case of resigning after the fact, it just sounds a lot stranger. It's hard to know for certain what happened.
I would have thought that they would have used a terminology like she's on medical
She's
leave.
on medical leave, or she had a serious medical event. We
Right.
can't disclose details, that type of thing.
So,
But I think in her case, I don't think she had the ability to realize that something was wrong. She continued to try to work and didn't give any indication to anyone else that she was having difficulty doing so, except for when she said, "I'm choking a little bit," so.
mhm. Wow. Quite an interesting event for sure.
Yeah, but perhaps it will highlight the lack of controller availability, because I know a lot of I've been listening to the other podcasts we have, and I hear on Twitter and listen to other controllers complaining about it, certainly in the UK, about the lack of coverage, certainly in the less busy hours, the night hours, where things usually aren't so bad. It comes down to very small numbers, and it's all done in the for cost cutting, because the airports want to increase obviously their profit margins, and if they could afford to provide a decent coverage, they would. But it appears that they seem to be able to get away with a much reduced coverage, and perhaps this will stop the slide. It doesn't take much to realize just how dangerous it can be if your one and only controller is incapacitated.
Even the controllers during my tour last week said that even in Atlanta Tower and approach, they're short-staffed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't quite understand why, other than they're not being employed, because I quite honestly, air traffic is a very responsible, reasonably well paid, an excellent job to have. I think I'd be very proud of being an air traffic controller.
Yes.
If I couldn't be a pilot. And I think it would be a fantastic job to have. I just don't understand why people aren't motivated to do it. And if they are, then, it's all down to who can get a job, and why you have to ask the question why the more aren't being employed.
I don't know that it has to do with interest or volume of people applying for the job. I think it comes back to funds to actually fund those spots for controllers, potentially. Because there's a couple different ways you can go down the pathway to being a controller here in the US. Opposing Bases is probably a good place to find out information on that, their podcast. But basically, you can go to school and take a pathway that basically goes through university, technical school to become an air traffic controller. Or you can apply through a general pool, and they open that up every once in a while. They just had a round of recent general applications. I have no idea how many controllers they take from either of those two pathways. But I know that they have been hiring controllers. So hopefully that does something to alleviate those shortages.
Yeah.
Finally, I'd just like to say that I hope the lady herself, is okay and gets over this. And it may be not easy for her because, of course, the entire world, of those of us interested, know about it now. So, she may have a difficult time ahead, even if it is something that she, happened to her that was not of her causing. So, I do feel sorry for her, and I wish her well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the second item in the news folder. This was a very interesting event. Could have been a horrible tragedy, but it had a happy ending. In Portugal, an Air Astana Embraer ERJ 190, registration Papa 4 Kilo Charlie Juliet, performing flight 1388 from Alverca, Portugal to Minsk, Belarus, and further on to Almaty, Kazakhstan, with 3 crew and 3 passengers, was in the initial climb in adverse meteorological conditions. When the crew felt the aircraft did not adequately respond to control inputs, the autopilot could not be engaged. The aircraft developed oscillatory wing movements despite the crew using the controls in all 3 aircraft axes to counter and minimize the oscillations. The aircraft and occupants entered high G loads. The crew declared emergency, considering to ditch the aircraft in the ocean due to the lack of control, while continuing to struggle with the aircraft. None of the aircraft systems issued any indication of malfunction. Only alerts for abnormal flight altitudes occurred. The crew lost control completely several times, but were able to regain control to some extent. In discussion between the 3 pilots on board as well as the 3 technicians, the crew decided to disable the flight control module, the FCM, and put the flight controls into direct mode. Thereafter, the situation improved considerably, however, without restoring normal operation, as difficulties to control the aircraft's roll axis, ailerons, bank angle, remained. The crew realized the ailerons were behaving erratically and reduced roll control to an absolute minimum. To look for an airport in good weather, a plan was developed with ATC to land at Beja, Portugal. A pair of F-16 fighter aircraft by Portugal's Air Force joined the aircraft. A landing was intended on Beja's runway 19 right. The aircraft needed to go around twice due to unstabilized approaches, and then approached the third time, runway 19 right, and touched down on runway 19 left due to being unable to correct the drift. 2 occupants were taken to a hospital. Portugal's GPIAA rated the occurrence a serious incident and reported on November 14th, quote, all on board were physically and emotionally shaken, one of the passengers sustaining a leg injury. The investigation is ongoing, still pending confirmation from the undertaking of additional testing. The evidence that was possible to collect at the time of drafting suggesting the existence of failures in the aircraft roll controls configuration consistent with possible disturbance during maintenance actions. The aircraft had undergone maintenance at Alverca for like the past 6 weeks and was on its first flight after maintenance. And then there's a report, the text and body of the report from the GPIAA, and we'll put this in the show notes so you can see that as well. There are a couple of links also in the notes where there is some footage, video footage. I believe the one is from one of the F-16s as they were on the wing of the 190 coming in for landing at Beja, Portugal. Another from the ground viewpoint. And there is also a couple links here in the show notes to the audio, the ATC audio. It's not really good quality. Let me play just a little bit of it. I'm not going to play the whole thing because this thing went on for quite some time. And apparently it was quite an ordeal for the pilots to keep the airplane from crashing the moment they got this thing airborne. And so let me see if I can find the first one. All right, here we go. Wait a minute. Make sure I have the audio pipeline set up properly so that everybody can hear it. I'm glad I checked. Okay. I'm not playing anything yet, if you're wondering. Okay, here we go.
Flight, please approach at flight 1388, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Climate control in, runway 36, heading 060, request.
Kilo Zulu Romeo 1388, go ahead. Kilo Zulu Romeo 1388, Roger, Mayday. Go ahead with your request.
Stand by, for 1388. Approach at flight 1388, Mayday, 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 we have control, problem. Altitude proportional 300 feet, one heading 030.
Kilo Zulu Romeo 1388, Roger, Mayday. You have any request?
Standby Airline 1388. Airline 1388, request back to airport.
Kilo Zulu Romeo 1388, are you visual with Alberta? Kilo Zulu Romeo 1388, descend to 2,500 feet, QNH 1010.
Standby Airline 1388, on heading to 150, altitude 4,000 feet.
Kilo Zulu Romeo 1388, descend to 2,500 feet, QNH 1010.
Negative Airline 1388, now maintain 4,000 feet.
Roger, sir, maintain 4,000 feet and report when ready to proceed to Alberta.
Airline 1388, request back to airport.
Kilo Zulu Romeo 1388, turn left or right as you wish, heading 280.
Okay, this goes on, and again, it's really worth listening. These videos are from VAS Aviation, Vast Aviation, the YouTube channel that we use quite often to play audio, and you can see in the video the flight track using Flight Radar 24, and the reason why it's important to see this is that later on in this incident, they keep asking to get vectors to the sea because they want to ditch, because they just can't control the airplane. They're thinking there's absolutely no way we're going to be able to land on land because we just cannot control the aircraft enough to land on a runway. So they're thinking we're just going to have to ditch this thing. And the interesting thing, as you listen to the controllers telling them, what heading to fly and how far they need to fly before they are over the open sea, the whole time you're watching on Flight Radar 24, they're going in left turns, left circles, just spiraling along in the sky, moving in a general northerly direction. And sadly, ironically, every time further and further away from the sea. So every time they ask for the heading to get to the sea and ask for the distance to get there, the number keeps increasing because these guys are actually moving to the northeast, not to the southwest, the way they need to go. It's very frustrating. Obviously, in addition to the control problems, they must have had some instrumentation problems, and their instruments must not have been telling or giving them good heading information or something. I don't know. But as we hear in the part 2 video, I'll start it at the 7:12 minute mark.
Standby Airline 1388. Now aircraft is controllable.
Roger, confirm intentions.
Airline 1388, we need close airport with good weather.
Okay, so he says, obviously at this point they must have disconnected the FCOM or whatever it was called, the flight control computers, and were able to generally control the airplane enough to fly it southward down to Beja for landing. And anyway, it's a very you can hear the Portugal Air Defense Command F-16s talking to the flight. At times you can hear just the exasperation and just the incredible fatigue that these pilots were under. You can just hear it in their voices. It was quite quite a situation.
It's terrifying, Jeff. I don't know. There have been some similar instances of guys not having this problem, but having other control problems. There was a 747 in Japan where they lost all the hydraulics, and they spent, I don't know, about 40 minutes going up and down, out of control, basically. And I just can't. They all died. I just can't imagine the desperation that these pilots must have felt trying to control this aircraft that appeared to be completely uncontrollable.
Now, one of the commenters on the one of these YouTube videos, Nikita Kaminsky. Now, I don't know if this is real or somebody made this up, But this person commented, just received some information from the inside of ongoing investigation. Looks like maintenance guys switched the controls of the aircraft after a Class C inspection. Right after takeoff, pilots tried to roll the aircraft to one side and it rolled completely to the opposite. Tried to turn on the autopilot a couple of times, and when they switched it off, the aircraft would roll to the left every single time. Also, there was a brief 90 degrees nose down dive with the GPWS screaming. After stabilizing the aircraft, they were left to fly only with rudder, elevators, and engines almost for the entire time they were up there. Basically, they had to learn to fly the aircraft in 2 hours. The captain was so tired that the co-pilot had to land the aircraft on the third try, breaking 3 runway lights. On board, there were 6 souls, 3 pilots, 3 engineers. One of them had to be assisted in an ambulance because of heart problems.
Yeah, this was not a normal passenger flight for them. So one wonders if they were perhaps checking the aircraft out after maintenance, because it's a little unusual just to have the 3 crew and 3 engineers on board, who were presumably there, I don't know, perhaps to get back where they came from or to observe the aircraft while it was flying. And presumably they were of some help, I hope, to the crew. But if they've somehow misconnected, you think of modern airplanes, these things should be foolproof. I know it's happened in the past that you do checks on the ailerons and they've been misconnected. I know a friend of mine, captain on my airline, he was also flying as a reserve officer on Harriers, and he got airborne in a Sea Harrier to do a test flight to discover that they had connected the ailerons the wrong way around. And very shortly after takeoff, he lost control of the airplane, had to eject out of it. He had ejected out of 2 Harriers in his career, both for various problems. So he's considerably shorter than he was when he started.
Jeez.
But so these things do happen. But you would like to think, like you make the connections impossible to connect the wrong way around. I mean, that would be a good piece of design, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
It would, with multiple checks along the
Yeah.
way.
Well, which is why, we do flight control checks. Now, we
Mhm.
can't see our ailerons going up and down, but when you can, you put the stick over and the aileron comes up to meet it. He
Actually look
pushes.
out at the wing and see what that aileron is.
Exactly. So, but we can see on our flight control indications on the electronic displays we have what the controls are doing when we move them, and it's one of the things I check. We tell the other guy which way we're moving the stick, and he calls which way the flight controls have moved. So, you think that would be foolproof, but I don't know. Apparently not.
Not always, I guess.
Wow.
Interesting. But
That
yeah,
must be
I believe the aircraft was in for a C check.
It
That
was.
information is there.
Yep. It was a C check, and it was there for about 6 weeks. And I think it's, protocol, and not only protocol, but probably regulatory requirement that the aircraft be flown by on a check flight before return to passenger service. So that's probably as
Aristana, where are they based? Do either of you know? 'Cause I
I
don't know, because I know they were
don't know.
they were ferrying the plane back to Belarus and then Kazakhstan. So I'm assuming that part of the world,
Yeah.
and that they're not regularly flying in Portugal, perhaps.
They were probably it's kind of like what I've done before for Acme, fly an 88 or a 90 down to Mexico
Mexico. Yep.
for big checks like that. And we have people that are qualified to fly the airplanes after they go through a major check like that and go through, put it through its paces to make sure everything is okay before, it's put back into passenger service.
Mhm.
So that's probably what
And
this
there,
is.
for those of you who are listening, excuse me, there actually is video, I think, from one of the F-16s of the aircraft finally on its final attempt at landing. And you can see how off the center line they are when they touch down. So
Yeah, it turns out it wasn't even the runway they were trying to land on.
Oh, it was. Oh, really? A different runway?
They were going for 19 right, and they ended up landing on 19
Oh, jeez.
left.
Yeah, that's. I hope to never experience such
Oh, I know.
terrible difficulties in controlling an aircraft ever. I can't even imagine.
Wow. So hopefully we'll hear more about exactly what happened in this instance. But I could definitely see, this crew, was obviously one of the better ones, because I could see a lot of other crews not being able to control it at all and just, giving up and letting the thing crash.
Sure.
So, all right.
Oh, and one other point, I don't know how much of I mean, certainly the flight was erratic and the path was erratic and lots of circles going on there, but this aircraft did not have ADS-B. So when you look at the flight radar data, they were using something called, gosh, I forget, it's like MLAT, multilateration. But basically, it's they can track the aircraft when there's 4 different flight radar 24 receivers that are basically able to identify the aircraft. But if they lose one of those signals, they don't get a good data point. So the path may look even a little bit more erratic than it actually was.
Yeah. Good point. Thanks, Steph. Okay. Moving on to C. Pilot error led to military plane crash that killed 9 airmen in May. So in May of this year, we talked about it on the show. A Air Guard, Puerto Rico National Guard C-130 airplane crashed shortly after takeoff out of Savannah. The airplane had been at Savannah undergoing some maintenance, including work to the number 1 engine, I believe. I have to remind myself here. I think that was the engine that failed. It was either 1 or 2, one of the engines on the left wing. And they were doing some stuff to it to prepare it for its final flight from Savannah to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Basically, it was going to be removed from service, and it was going to spend the rest of its life at the boneyard. And let's see what the article here says. The mishap aircraft had been at Savannah for almost a month to undergo pre-scheduled fuel cell maintenance and unscheduled work on engine number 1. And by the 156 Air Wing maintenance personnel using the facilities of the 165th Airlift Wing. So I guess the Puerto Rican Guard mechanics were working on the airplane at the 165th Airlift Wing facilities in Savannah. During the takeoff roll, this is from the, is it the final report? I think it is. Yeah. During the takeoff roll, engine 1 revolutions per minute, RPM, fluctuated and did not provide normal RPM when mishap pilot number 1 advanced the throttle lever into the flight range for takeoff. Approximately 8 seconds prior to aircraft rotation, engine 1 RPM and torque significantly decayed, which substantially lowered thrust. The fluctuation on roll and significant performance decay went unrecognized by the mishap crew until rotation, when the mishap pilot 1 commented on aircraft control challenges, and the mishap aircraft veered left and nearly departed the runway into the grass before it achieved flight. The mishap aircraft departed KSAV at approximately 11:25 local time. As the mishap crew retracted the landing gear, they identified the engine 1 RPM and torque malfunction, and the aircraft commander called for engine shutdown. However, the mishap crew failed to complete the takeoff continued after engine failure procedure, the engine shutdown procedure, and the after takeoff checklist as directed by the flight manual, and the mishap aircraft's flaps remained at 50%. Additionally, the aircraft commander banked left into the inoperative engine, continued to climb, and varied left and right rudder inputs. At an altitude of approximately 900 feet mean sea level and 131 knots indicated airspeed, the mishap pilot 1 input over 9 degrees of left rudder. The mishap aircraft skidded left, the left wing stalled, and the mishap aircraft departed controlled flight and crashed. So,
wow,
we talked a little bit about engine shutdowns during check rides and training from Arnaud in Paris last episode, and we talked a little bit about critical engines and problems that you may experience in a multi-engine airplane when you have an engine inoperative. And when I read, and that's why I bolded these things, putting in the left rudder when that's
It's the dead
completely
engine.
the dead
Yeah.
engine, the complete opposite thing you would do when you have an engine
So
failure.
just to make it kind of simple, some of the memory items or the mnemonics that pilots learn when they're first learning to fly multi-engine aircraft. When you have an engine failure, you have significantly reduced power or thrust. You're going to need rudder on the opposite side to counteract that and maintain straight and level flight. So the way that you identify your dead engine is that's your dead foot, because that's the one that's not working. So dead foot, dead engine. So this was engine number 1, which is on the left side. Then he's putting in left rudder. Not correct.
Wrong.
Also, banking into the inoperative engine is the opposite
Not a
thing to
good
do.
idea. Yeah.
The mnemonic there is to raise the dead. So you would want to bank the
I
opposite
like your
direction.
instructor who taught you all these things. Very good.
Very useful.
Yeah.
We learned to kick the ball. So, you've got the slip has a little ball in it. Not on modern airplanes like I fly. It's all electronic. But in the old days, it was just a little ball in a tube. And when that swung, you just kicked it to kick it in the opposite direction.
Mhm.
And that works.
Yeah. So they didn't have a chance when these improper control inputs were used. The aircraft didn't have a fighting chance to survive that, which is a shame.
There are so many errors. I mean, a litany of them, really. You do wonder if the crew were completely on the ball that day. I mean, what had they been doing the night before? I had to ask, but it's possibly because, they didn't reject the takeoff right at the beginning when they were getting RPM fluctuations. So why on earth not?
Mhm.
And certainly before 8 seconds prior to rotation, again, they lost the engine. That's a long time, 8 seconds.
Mhm.
So I'm going, well, why didn't you reject then? And then not to complete all the required drills. I'm going, well, that's damned odd as well. And to be absolutely blunt, this particular emergency, an engine failure at V1, is our most practiced engine failure drill. I mean, we do it all the time. Because it's one of the hardest ones, our authorities consider that the one you must be most capable of doing. So we do it every single time we're in the sim. I'm assuming they would have had the same training. So I'm just a little bemused.
Yeah, it's flabbergasting to see all the things they missed, as you mentioned. That's something they should have never. That airplane should never have gotten airborne.
No,
to begin with.
No.
Wow. Wow. So I don't know what else to say about that, except that
very sad and very sad. They all
Exceptionally
died.
sad. Yeah.
All right. Finally, item D. This is a head scratcher. We talked about the Lion Air crash in the last couple of episodes, where it crashed into the Java Sea shortly after takeoff. And first, we learned that there were some altitude and airspeed disagree indications, and then something about an angle of attack sensor giving them false indications, and then a hint that there was some kind of a system that nobody seemed to know anything about that was put into effect for the MAX models to help the airplane recover from low gross weight, certain center of gravity settings, etc. And what it does basically is on its own starts trimming the aircraft. And in this case, it was trimming nose down for a 10-second burst. And now, of course, well, we'll skip that part right now. The thing that's frustrating about this is that apparently, according to pilots from American Airlines and Southwest Airlines, and also confirmed by the other operator in the United States that operates the 737 MAX models, United Airlines, that this was never disclosed by Boeing and they didn't put it in the flight manual. Nobody seemed to know that this system, the MCAS system, I believe it's called, was installed in the airplane. And that is the thing that is, I'm floored that there's a system that we're supposed to know everything about these airplanes and how all the systems operate, etc. And then you're flying an airplane and you don't even know that there's this system in there that will do this. Now, it could be argued, as we mentioned in the last show, regardless of what was happening there, if the trim wheel is going nose down clack, 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 clack. You know, if you've ever been in a Boeing cockpit, when that trim wheel is moving, you can hear it moving and you can see it moving. And if it's moving for more than a few seconds, nose down, I'm going to do the procedure to stop it from doing that, because obviously that's a runaway. In my mind, that's a runaway stabilizer trim moment, and I need to do the boldface, the action items to stop it from occurring. But that doesn't let Boeing off the hook here for installing a system in an airplane and not letting pilots know. I just can't. I can't believe this.
No, just crazy to me. I can't even figure out the right words to say about it. It's like, oh yeah, well, we put it in there because we needed it for. I mean, basically, it sounds like they needed it as part of the certification for the aircraft.
Yes. Because
But
the engines are so much larger and they produce so
Correct.
much more thrust.
Yep. So there
That
had
they
to
had to
be
have the system to kind of, and I think
oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna say this did not come from Boeing, but an argument I saw for why this may have happened is because it was supposed to be a system that was basically never intended to have a problem, which doesn't make any sense at all. But assuming appropriate maintenance on it and assuming that it was serviced the correct way, then it was intended to be something that would help instead of hinder. But clearly that's not the case.
I'd also seen that somebody said that, well, they sold this MAX model as, hey, if your pilots are already checked out on all the other 737 models, the new generation 737s, the 800, the 700, the 900, it's just like those. You don't they
Well,
don't have to
there's just a
learn
little
anything
bit
else.
of differences training. I mean,
Mhm.
I've seen anywhere from, a couple hours as a computer-based training course just to be familiar with a few new things about the aircraft. But
But how hard would it be just to
to
kind
put
of
that
add, oh
in,
yeah, by the way,
there's this other thing. Yeah.
there's an added thing that we have in there to keep you guys out of trouble.
Yeah, very true. And they're not the only aircraft manufacturer to have this sort of a problem, because we know that Airbus has had a few problems with its flight laws. That Airbus A330 with an Australian crew on that started getting unexpected nose down pitch moments when they were flying, just heading off across the ocean around Western Australia. They successfully brought the aircraft back. They were eventually managed to control it. And we're always learning about things like that, because that was just one case of in a million when two failures in identical circumstances fooled the flight computers into thinking, I've got three systems, two are reading the same thing. But unbeknown to everyone, those two were both broken in an identical manner.
Right.
And so the system, which is supposed to vote out the broken component, said, well, those two have got to be correct because they're both reading the same thing. And it voted out the only portion of the angle of attack sensors that were giving a correct reading. No one would have dreamt that could have happened. But it obviously did. And now we're very aware of it and we know exactly what to do. I don't know exactly what the problem with this was, but it sounds kind of similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the same thing where it's a scenario that was perhaps never even thought of because it was contrary to how the system is supposed to perform in the first place, perhaps.
Yeah, but it is a growing trend
Sure.
amongst companies to only give the pilots what they consider to be the essential information. We don't get. If I look at my flight control manual, someone just asked me a question in the chat room, and I have no way to answer that, because if I look at my flight manual, it'll have some very simple wiring diagrams and a few single line explanations. There's no way I would be able to find out exactly how something worked without possibly going to the engineering manuals, or probably having to go back to Airbus and ask them for the detailed examination, detailed explanation, sorry, because that's what it would take, because our manuals have been simplified almost to the point of being ridiculously light in technical information.
Yes, they're thinking, well, they're trained pilots. We train them to follow checklists. And
Well,
if you
and
follow the checklist, everything will be fine.
Exactly. We've talked about this before, and I think you guys have both mentioned that at the beginning of your airline careers, Manuals and training was much more systems based and in detail, nitty gritty type stuff. And it's kind of moved away from that, as you said, more to here's how you just fly the thing. Here's the, buttons to push, things to do, checklist to follow. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the hows and whys as much.
Another example of this situation where an aircraft manufacturer has a system installed in an airplane. Now, in this case, the Scandinavian Air Service crash, let's see, what flight was it? Flight 751 out of Stockholm, Arlanda. And they ended up, it had something to do with de-icing. I don't think they de-iced the airplane properly. And as they started to rotate, some of the sheets of ice ended up getting ingested in both engines, which is not good. And so they were getting compressor stalls. And so the pilots were bringing the throttles back to help the engines recover, because if you keep the throttles full forward or full thrust, it's going to be hard to stop the compressors from stalling. And every time they did that, then the throttles automatically went back up to the high thrust settings. The system is called automatic thrust restoration, and it had not been described to the flight crew by the Scandinavian Airline system. It was not in their manual. They didn't know anything about this. Now, I don't think in this case, I don't believe it was McDonnell Douglas's fault, because they, that was a system that most everybody that operated the airplane knew about. It was just that SAS decided that they didn't need to tell their pilots this system was there. And it was a very disorienting and frustrating situation for the pilots, because every time they tried to pull the power back, and I don't think it had anything to do with whether the auto throttles were on or off. The system still acted to put the thrust up to a high thrust setting.
Yeah, this dumbing down is a really worrying trend, I must admit. It concerns me.
Yeah, it is. And as you mentioned, Steph, yes, it used to be where, like when I went through training on the 727, we always joked we could basically take a 727 completely apart and put it all back together. I mean, that's how well you knew everything. Of course, that's an exaggeration. But I mean, we knew like temperature settings where certain valves would close, and there was no way for us to even read whatever temperature is in that area. So you ask yourself, well, why do we have to know it's 425 degrees Celsius?
If I have no way to measure it or no way to know what it actually is in that moment.
Exactly. I mean, it's one thing to know that there's a system, if it gets hot, that does this, but to know the exact numbers and units.
So it's this balance of trying to figure out how much information do you need to know in order to be safe and in order to work and understand what's going on with the system in the event of an emergency.
And the pendulum has swung way too far the other direction.
And,
I think
certainly there has to be a balance there. Certainly there's going to be information that's extraneous, that's not going to be helpful no matter what. And then there's going to be the other side where you don't have enough information to even understand what the aircraft is trying to do.
Right.
Yeah. And the fact that this fault was so strong, so severe, that it was capable of flying the aircraft into the ground, really has me concerned.
Yeah. So I look forward, and I know many of you listening to the show out there are fly the 737 and maybe even the 737 MAX. We know somebody in particular who I believe today has flown it for the very first time for his airline.
That is correct. Yes.
And he told me he would definitely send some feedback regarding
Excellent. Look forward to that. That'll be good.
All right. With that, I think it's now time to move on to your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
I think we're at the hour and a half point. Is that about right? I think we started about 45.
Liz sent a text about
Liz just sent a message.
Yeah, it should be an hour and a half now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you like to take a break, or you want to keep pressing on?
I just need a beer.
Okay.
I might go find something to drink as well.
All right.
Be right back.
Very good. Hello, everybody in the chat room. Yeah, you know what? We had, and Liz can confirm this, we had like a bunch more news items in the news folder. There must have been at least, what, Liz, 10? And I knew that some of these things were going to be just so big, and we were going to want to talk about them so much that there was absolutely no way we could do anywhere near that number. So we We whittled it down to these 4. So we'll probably put those others off to the side, and if nothing new happens in between now and the next show or two, then hopefully we'll cover all the other items. Lane says, it's not what we know, we don't know that scares us. It's not what we know, but what we don't know that scares me. It's what we don't know that we don't know. I don't think I read that right. Sorry, Lane. Yeah, it's so important that you have more than just a very vague idea of what these systems are doing. Now, it's a hassle when you have to learn all these systems. It's hard. It's a lot of information. And even though I really rather training be as easy as possible, I think it's best to know more, and because that could save my life and the life of all my passengers and crew. So let's see here. Hello, everyone. Hi there, Robert. Dave. Who let Dave in the chat room? Come on. Landon, John, Carl, Simon, Liz, of course. And I think we're back to our old about 25-second latency now, aren't we? But everything is running a little bit more smoothly. Nobody's complaining about the stream, right? All right. Here is the lovely Miss Steph.
Who, me?
Mm-hmm. Anybody else around here named Steph?
I don't know. Hello? Nope. No one answers.
Okay.
What's going on?
No, I was just talking to the chat room.
How is the chat room?
Everybody seems to be doing fine and not experiencing any audio and video issues. And I was just saying that, we're back to the old chat room latency issue, but that's okay. I think it works better this way.
There's a serious lack of beer in my fridge.
Oh, no.
I don't even know how old this one is.
What do you have?
Sierra Nevada Otra vez. Otra vez.
Yeah, they still make that one?
I don't know.
But
it's much more of a summer. I've just got a date on it.
I'm in union with you, though. I'm also drinking a Sierra Nevada product.
Yes. It sounded refreshing.
Yes.
Need to actually stop and get some celebration.
Yes, you do.
Yes.
Don't do it now, though.
Ready when
I just
you
have to
are.
go make a run to the store. I'll be back in about 30 minutes.
Not now.
Oh, okay.
All right. Let's forge on, shall we?
Certainly.
Okay.
Ray, my neighbor to the north in Alpharetta, writes, "Hi, Captain Jeff. I headed out to Rome a couple of weeks ago. No, not the country, or not the city in the beautiful country of Italy, but Rome, Georgia, which is northwest of Atlanta.
In the state of Georgia, not the country of Georgia.
Yes, in the
to be
state.
completely clear.
Georgia, yeah. Once I got to the airport, the total absence of Alitalia aircraft made me realize, I'm going to start over. He went ahead and just did everything I did, but in a much more humorous way. I headed out to Rome a couple of weeks ago. Once I got to the airport, the total absence of Alitalia aircraft made me realize that I was at RMG rather than FCO. That, and the fact that my journey there had not involved the hometown airline. Anyways, I had a good time. Was there for the practice day on Friday and the first day of the show Saturday. Pretty neat. The organizer had arranged for some of us photographers to get in ahead of the crowds on Saturday. And apart from some good shots of airplanes in the dawn's early light, I had an interesting and unhurried visit in the cockpit of a C-130 H3 chatting with its navigator. And then he gives us a link to, and you know what? I don't, that must be his link to all the photos that he took there. So we'll include this in the show notes as well. Anyways, to the purpose of this email, later in the Saturday morning, Grumman OV1D Mohawk serial number 162 Charlie, November 10 Victor Delta flew in. What can I say? I'm a sucker for triple-tailed airplanes. Messenger, York, Connie, Twin Pioneer, OV1D, grin. Anyway, from what I can see, The fuselage and tail of this Mohawk are covered with names. I kind of guess this is some sort of roll of honor, but I haven't been able to find anything via Google. Can anyone on the APG network enlighten me to what the names represent? And by the way, I kept the APG faith proudly, wearing my Save the Mad Dogs t-shirt amongst the Saturday crowd. Subtle hint. Remember that when you're looking for fodder, I mean anorex, to join you in the Acme Mad Dog farewell flight under 7 East Coast bridges between Miami and Bangor sometime in the future. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to be doing that flight, Ray. That seems a little much.
Yeah, unless you want to be wearing an orange jumpsuit at the end of it.
Exactly. He ends, thanks as always for the great podcast series. Stay well. Regards, Ray Williams in Alpharetta, Georgia. And he included some, well, we have one photo here in the show notes, but again, a link to all of the other great photos he took. He's quite a photographer. And thank you very much for checking in with the report from the air show in Rome, Georgia, Ray.
Very interesting aircraft. I don't think I've ever seen a picture of that one before.
I haven't either, honestly.
It looks like it should have some sort of personality, like a face painted on the front of it, doesn't it? Kind of.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a bug face.
Yeah, like a bug with the big windows, and you can see the whole interior of the cockpit there.
Must have been a forward air controller type of mission.
Yeah, perhaps.
Interesting. Well, thanks, Ray. Let's see. Moving on, Ivan. He sent some feedback a couple of shows ago regarding the C-141 that he saw when he was at Dobbins Air Base here in the Atlanta area. And we talked about the instrumentation and how it was kind of ahead of its time, and they had a lot of vertical tape instruments. Now, honestly, I'm looking at this photo. He said, ask and you shall receive. And he sent a photo of the a little bit further back where you can see some of the instrumentation of the engines in the center panel. And you can tell that they are vertical tape instruments. They are not digital because digital wasn't a thing back then. They're all analog, but they're analog tape instruments and presented in a vertical fashion. And you'll note that if you look at the primary flight or display, well, it's not really a primary flight display. It's kind of like what we had right before the primary flight displays started to come into use. You have the artificial horizon in the middle there, and then right below it, you have the heading magnetic indicator or HDMI, and then off to the right, you'll note that that's an altimeter. It's a vertical tape altimeter, and on the left side, vertical tape airspeed, vertical tape Mach, and also vertical tape radio altimeters. So it was, as I said, pretty ahead of its time. This was the early 1960s when they started putting these out there. I think 1963, something like that. I don't remember the white background. Like you see all these gauges, and they're all black, and then the back
the white panel
is white. I don't remember it being like that, honestly.
Well, maybe it's not actually. Is this just a black and white photo?
No, I think it's a real photo.
that
It's
real-
just that maybe
real colors?
maybe this is an A model and not a B model, and maybe the A models look like this and the B models weren't. I don't know. Not sure exactly.
I'm looking at the radio call 60186. What's that about?
That's the tail number of the aircraft.
Okay.
November.
Yeah,
60186.
and so our call sign was always Mac when I flew it was Mac 60186 or whatever it is, the Mac and then the actual tail number of your airplane.
You seem to be seeing a bigger version of the photograph I've got. But
Yeah, I can only see half of it, I think, from what you described.
Oh,
yeah. So,
well,
from what
you
I
can. Oh, okay.
I can see the AI and I can see the top of the HSI. But from what I can see, it looks surprisingly like the Phantom instruments that we had. Very similar.
Well, so I'm going to click on and see what you guys are looking at. Because they're using show notes. Well, yeah, I'm looking. Oh.
Oh.
You
No,
can
I see the
scroll
other picture now. I had to click on the link.
Yeah. Yeah, if you click
Yeah,
on the link,
different.
and then
Okay.
you can zoom in if you want, and then
Yeah.
once you're zoomed in, you can use a 2-finger on the trackpad to move it around.
Yeah, I can see the big picture that you were describing now.
Okay.
Did you find it, Nick?
Nah.
He doesn't care.
Oh, I have now. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, that looks quite similar. This one's in color.
Yeah, the one that we were looking at is not in color. That's why I asked if it was maybe a different color, but now I see.
Now, did your attitude indicator spin around and give you headings, or as well as up and down, left and right?
No.
No, the Phantom one did.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know. It's been I last flew that airplane in 1985. So
what's the matter with you?
It's been 33 years.
Long time ago. I'm old.
33 years to be exact.
And the undercarriage selector looks pretty much identical to the Phantom one.
Really?
Yeah, it looks very similar.
Interesting.
Same sort of doll's eyes barber's pole when the gear was in transit, and then used to do little pictures of wheels when it was down.
Uh-huh. That's a great airplane. It really is. Yeah, I think that when this Evernote note translated to the Google Docs version, that first photo didn't open up automatically for you. That's why you had to click on that thing. So
yeah.
What was the bit of kit that's up on the coaming? With 3 knobs on.
I think that I don't really remember this, but I think it may be a checklist.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It looks
checklist.
like a kind of a scrolling checklist.
Maybe we had that. I don't. And the thing over there, it looks like a wireless Wi-Fi.
A router, yes.
I think that was what we called station keeping equipment. So when we were in formation with other, but again, I don't remember that. So maybe they put that on after I flew it, or I don't know. Also, these little doohickeys that are kind of sticking out either side of the upper center console. I don't remember what those things are either. So,
and you had your own set of throttles, even though they're only a foot apart.
It was actually a pretty wide. I know the picture doesn't look like it, but it's a very wide cockpit. And I guess Lockheed decided that, yeah, instead of sharing a common set of throttles, we'd put a set on each side.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Anyway, if you want to see the pictures that we're looking at and understand this discussion, please check out the show notes. Thank you, Ivan.
I noticed you had the same Wanderlight with the Bulldog clip-on that used to keep coming off and falling on your head. Top left.
Oh, yeah.
Top left is a sort of a light with a cable on that you could move around the cockpit and clip onto different things. The one on the F4 continually fell off and used to, used to land on your lap or hit you on the arm or something when it came loose.
Yeah.
Useless piece of kit.
Yeah, well, we weren't pulling the same G forces that you were in the F4.
Possibly. That might have something to do with it.
Yeah. I think we call those things Grimes lights for some reason.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Not sure why. All right. Moving on. 3. David writes in. Good evening, Captains Jeff, Nick, Dana, and Dr. Steph. While I'm listening to the live tech setup of 347, I had a query or perhaps a thought. From listening, it seems that Captain Dana, as a new captain, must have low seniority and is not flying very much at all, while the older pilots like Jeff and all are all bidding to fly as much as they can. This seems back to front. Surely there is logic in making the new captains work harder so that they gain previous or precious experience. Man, I'm not reading very well here. Surely their logic is in making the new captains work harder so that they gain precious experience. Dana is not a low-time pilot, but I understand that some newer pilots on the MD-80, MD-90 are reaching from the left seat and maybe not getting much practice. The older pilots could then have a rest on occasions. I'm guessing that some of this is due to how pilots are paid, but presumably with enough will, that could be changed. No, David, you're wrong. I mean, no, you're right. The first part of the sentence, it is everything to do with how we're paid. And the second part, presumably with enough will, that could be changed. I'm afraid that it's so entrenched in the system of airlines with unions here in at least the United States, that I don't see it changing. But yeah, it is ironic, that's for sure, that you would think that you'd want the people out there that had just converted to these new positions and didn't have much experience in them would be the ones doing the bulk of the flying, and people like me who had been on it for a very long time could just stay home. But I can't make as much money by doing. I could go on reserve, like Dana's on, and I could do very little flying, but you're only guaranteed a certain number of hours per month, and that's it. Now, when I'm flying a regular schedule, as I do, I have the ability to pick up extra time during the month, and even occasionally fly those trips that I call green slips, which are trips that are paid at twice the normal rate. So if you're a dude like me, and many of us are my age at my company, that have children who are in college, it gets pretty expensive here. The United States doesn't provide free education, and you have to pay a lot of money sometimes for some of these schools. And so you go out there and you fly as much as you can. Anything to add?
Well, I was actually hoping Nick was going to chime in and let us know about things in other countries across the pond.
Yeah, how do they handle it at Acme Red?
Well, we get a salary. You do get an element of flying pay. But if, say, you're sick, then that's made up for you, because obviously it's not your fault you can fly. It's only really if you, for some reason, turn down flights or, go on a reduced roster with your pay, and then it doesn't come back that much. It's not a huge portion of your pay. And we don't have any different pay scales for different types. If you belong to my company and fly an airplane, you get paid the same as all the other pilots.
Very interesting. Yeah, completely different system than what we have here.
Yeah.
Mhm. But I agree with David. I think it makes a lot of sense. You want folks who have just come into it to be working all the time, flying all the time, and gaining those the knowledge of the systems, the knowledge of how the aircraft works. Getting some landings under your belt.
Yep.
I think all of that is good experience, and to go through training, and then especially. I know it happens at some regionals, not all of them, but depending on their staffing issues, new pilots go through their initial training and then don't fly for quite a long time,
Yeah,
or very little flying.
We know some people that
Mhm.
are experiencing that.
Yep.
And when I was new on the various airplanes and new positions, even if I was very low seniority and I was on reserve, I was always putting in requests to fly whenever I could, because I knew that this information that I just learned in the simulator and some of my early flights would be lost if it wasn't.
If you don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah, exactly. So as much as it's tempting to enjoy having all that time off, I think it's very important that you force yourself to get out there and just do it, because that way you become better at it and you become more comfortable with it.
Things that are skills based require you to actually use those skills to maintain proficiency.
Right.
Yeah, I think Dana's probably suffering a little bit at the moment because he is flying now and he hasn't flown for a little while, and he's finding it a little bit difficult, harder than he was when he was very current.
Yeah, the thing that he has going for it himself is that he had many 11 years or more on the airplane as a first officer. Now, it's different. He's in a different role, and that's all new. But as far as the airplane is concerned and flying it and that kind of thing, it's not such a critical thing. But if somebody had just upgraded to captain on the Mad Dog, coming from a different airplane and had never flown this airplane before, like I did when I was displaced off the 727 and I got bumped down to the Mad Dog, I'd never flown the airplane before. So at least I'd had experience being a captain for a couple of years, but I did not have experience flying the airplane. So it was important for me to get out and fly it as much as I could.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, David, for your question. Item 4, Philip says, "Hey guys, I've written in once before and I'm going to try to keep this short because I know some of the feedback can be quite extensive. as I'm finishing up final year here at CSUSM, which I had to look up. It's California State University, San Marcos, which is in North San Diego County. My father is trying to persuade me to finish my economics degree and pursue my passion for aviation by joining the Air Force and gaining my license that way, and later transitioning into the commercial side of aviation. Any pros, cons you could give me? Advice? Other options? Thanks, you guys, so much. Love the show. And the Air Force, the military, as Captain Nick and I can profess, is an excellent way to learn how to fly. And the bonus is that they pay you as they're teaching you how to fly. You're not paying anybody else, so it's a very economical way to learn how to fly. The downside, at least here in the U.S., and that's the system that I know, is that if you go into the military active duty, then after you get your wings, you have a commitment to serve. And for me, it was 6 years after I got my wings. Now it's, I think, 10 years after you get your wings, which effectively puts you in the military for at least 11 years or more before you're able to get out or separate. I would highly recommend that if you're interested in getting into the Air Force, that you look into an Air National Guard unit or an Air Force Reserve unit, because you'll go through the same training that the active duty people go through, but your commitment after you get your wings is much, much different. You can fly with your Guard unit and Air Force Reserve unit, and at the same time, petition or put your applications in for the airlines and fly both at the same time. Now, it can be a lot of work. You're not going to have as much free time between trips if you're flying for the airlines, but you get your foot in the door, you get hired, and most of the airlines, if not all, here in the United States are seniority based. And the soonest that you can get hired by an airline, the better, because then your life gets much better when you start getting seniority. And then you'll have to, work a weekend or two for the Guard or Air Force Reserve unit to serve your commitment. But it's a great way to go if you can find a unit that will hire you and then get that pilot slot.
Yeah, I have to agree. Compared with civilian training, Air Force training is second to none. You'll get considerably more hours. You'll get to fly in much more exacting circumstances, and you will learn a great deal more that might be of use to you one day when you're pursuing a civil career. So I cannot stress that enough. The flying you will get during your military training is fantastic. And what Captain Jeff says sounds brilliant, because we don't have an equivalent over here. But I still think that if you were to go into the regular Air Force and serve 10 or 11 years, compared with a career that's going to last 40, 45 years, that's not a huge amount. You're still going to have, years and years in your major airline to build up a decent pension and live a happy and fruitful life. So the lovely thing about doing Air Force flying is that it's completely different to anything you'll do in the civil world. And when you're droning around flying in civvy flying for your entire career, it's very much the same. It's a bit like Groundhog Day. So it's real nice to be able to do something different and take that experience into the civil world, knowing that you have tested your mettle and done the most exciting flying that you're capable of doing. And then when you settle into an airliner, you don't feel like you've missed out on anything.
So true, so true. And more and more, I'm flying with a lot of new hires at Acme who put in a full 20 years or 22 years or whatever in the active duty military. And so they served a full career, and they have a full pension, and they are now flying for, one of the best airlines in the world, and making good compensation as well. So, it's all about timing. Just the timing happened to work out perfectly for these guys that have been hired in the last 4 or 5 years. And may not be the same for you, you know, projected out 20 years from now or 22 years from now, but you know, it's still a way to go.
Timing is everything, isn't it? But I would also say to Philip, remember too, there are plenty of options and ways to get into a commercial airline career. And I would say do what is right for you and don't feel pressured by anyone else, even if it is your family. So what Captains Jeff and Nick have said is wonderful advice. I think it's good advice to take, but if there's some other way you're thinking of doing things, then that's not wrong either. So.
That's true. So true. Just to kind of give you an example of, so when I learned about the Air National Guard and Air Force Reserve thing was after I had already raised my hand and had been inducted into the Air Force active duty military program. And I met this guy at officer training school in San Antonio and started talking about, you know, what he was going to do and all that, you know, where he came from. And he goes, yeah, he has a pilot slot from the reserve unit at Dobbins. And I said, the reserve unit, what's that? And so he explained it to me and I went, ooh, that's what I want to do. And he goes,
too late. Timing is everything.
This is what he said to me, basically.
Too late. You'd taken the Queen's shilling.
Yeah, it's too late, man. You needed to do that before you know, got inducted into the active duty. And I went, oh. So we went through officer training school together. We went through pilot training together. He got hired by Acme Airlines in 1985. His seniority number right now is 300 something. He's been a 777 captain for, I don't know, maybe 10 years already. He's a very senior captain at Acme Airlines. My number is pretty good still, but I can't touch that airplane. Well, I can. If I go up to it, I can touch it, but I can't fly it as a captain. My number is 1,700 and something or other. So there are 1,400, almost 1,500 numbers between the two of us. And that's the difference between getting hired in the fall of 1985 and the winter of 1988. So it made a big difference.
And I mean, it really sounds like a best of both worlds scenario there. So if it's something you're interested in, if you're interested in going the military route, weigh all those options, but keep all of that in the back of your mind.
And as Steph just mentioned, you know, there are other ways there's so many different ways to get there. And Patrick just so happened to be asking about another way.
Hey guys, this is Patrick Bliss out in Eastern North Carolina. Been a pretty recent fan of the show. I started at the beginning, but I realized it was going to be about 8 years before I finally caught up. So I've been listening to the new episodes. Really like the new format and hearing from everybody. Let's see here. I have recently reignited my idea to become an airline pilot, and I'm looking at a program called ATP Flight School. They've got locations all over the country, and I was kind of wondering what you guys thought about it. My wife and I have recently started a GoFundMe campaign to try to put together the funds to put me through school. And so I thought I'd see what I was getting myself into. And besides, I always thought Captain Bliss sounded like a good thing. Hope you guys are doing well. Appreciate the show and love the work you're doing. Thanks. Bye.
Well, Captain Bliss is pretty cool, I have to admit, but there's a guy, one of our great listeners, and has been for quite some time. In fact, he was at the very first APG meetup that I ever did. And his last name is Cool. So Captain Cool.
Captain Cool.
Wow.
That's brilliant.
That trumps your bliss. And the other thing is, isn't ignorance bliss?
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
Could be.
Sorry, Patrick. Just kidding.
Brain damage can be bliss.
It can be. In fact,
let's move back to some positive things here. So, Eastern North Carolina, woohoo! I'm assuming that's somewhere out Greenville way. I am familiar. ATP Flight School. I don't think any of us have any firsthand knowledge with that one in particular. But for those who are listening, who are wondering what that's all about, it is a large flight school here in the U.S., locations all around the country. I have known flight instructors of mine who went through that program to get to the point where they were flight instructors. They all had positive things to say about it. It is a well-defined program, so it's not the Part 161 or Part 61 program where you're kind of, doing self-study and things like that. It's part, oh my gosh, I just blanked
141.
on that. Thank you, 141. Woo!
Which happens to be a good airplane too.
where you're going to have a syllabus and a curriculum and pretty much define steps along the way to get from point A to point B. So if that's the kind of learning that appeals to you, that's certainly the way to go. Tends to cost a little bit more out of pocket than if you go through some of the ratings on your own and can do some more of the self-study. But maybe on the flip side of the coin, if that's not the right type of learning for you, it could actually cost you more if you're spending more hours of your own time trying to do the learning. So it's just things that you have to weigh, look into it. I've not heard anyone say anything bad about the program, and they have a lot of resources. So for students who are doing their cross countries and things like that, oftentimes you're with another student, so folks to go fly with, share some flight time and camaraderie along the way.
Okay. And unfortunately, Dana is not with us. I think Dana knows an instructor at DeKalb Peachtree Airport. I think there's an ATP facility there, and has talked very highly of this instructor, as have others. Now, that's just at the one location. As Steph mentioned, ATP is all over the country. And I've never heard anything bad said about that company.
Nope, just positive things. And I know one of my flight instructors went through that program, and she had good things to say. She didn't use them to do her CFI. No, she what did she use them for? I forget. She did the majority of her ratings there and had a good experience. So
yeah, so I say go for it. If that's the kind of program you want to go through and get all your ratings really, really quickly, go for it.
Some quick feedback from the chat room from folks who have done similar programs or the same program. Good for the self-motivated. Keep the cost down. You need to treat it like a job and do it every day. So
yeah.
Thank you, John, for that.
Yeah, thanks, John. And yeah, the one here in Atlanta is at PDK.
Mm-hmm. Ours is at Concord.
Oh, very close by.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. I think now is about the right time for the best part of the show. And you all know what that means. This week's Plane Tale by the Old Pilot.
The Old Pilot's Plain Tales. Gone for a Burton. Traditionally, pilots speak a great deal of indecipherable garble, which is used to bamboozle those from the outside of our tight little community into thinking we know something they don't. Of course, sometimes that's true, but as often as not, it's just a technical shorthand for the things we do. Mind you, we didn't think up the concept. For that, you'd have to go back a few centuries to those who braved the seas, particularly in the Navy, be it the original and Royal one, or one of those other outfits that came along after. Funnily enough, a lot of what we say in the cockpit goes back to those salt-soaked seamen. Indeed, the term cockpit comes from the traditional name for the location of the controls of a boat, and is a sunken area or open well that would keep the salt-soaked seamen out of the worst of the weather. Some might tell you that on a ship, the cockpit area resembles the pit used to contain fighting cocks. Indeed, on a fighting vessel, it was often blood-splattered, as it would also be the working place of the ship's surgeon. They would, however, be mistaken. In the more formal world of the Royal Navy, from whence the term originates, the cockpit was named after the area where the coxswain was stationed, and it was where the midshipmen and master's mates were berthed. A coxswain literally means boat servant, derived from the term cock or cockboat, from the word cog, meaning a small vessel, and swain, an Old English term which comes from Old Norse for boy or servant. Other terms have moved into common usage at the pointy end of an aircraft, in particular flight deck, which originally referred to the landing area of an aircraft carrier, but begins to appear around the time that the Boeing 747 came into being, so perhaps we can thank those politically correct top-floor executives for removing the giggle factor when the ladies refer to the pilot's working area on a big machine. Of course, there are other naval influences in aviation, which is why we measure an aircraft's speed in knots. This goes back to the days of estimating a ship's speed through the water by using a chip log or common log. This was a wooden panel weighted to float upright in the water, to which was attached a line tied evenly with spaced knots. The number of knots placed 47 feet 3 inches apart that passed through the hand during the time it took a 30-second sandglass to empty indicated the speed in knots. The coastal facility that was used to transfer people and cargo from a dock is called a port. This is thought to come from the term for a gateway that one would pass through to get from the dock to the city, and can be traced back to the Latin portus, meaning haven or harbour, or porta, meaning gateway, which was changed into the word port, which we find in Old French, Old English, and Middle English. Hence its adoption by aviators by adding air to become airport. Of course, being old, I still remember when the terms port and starboard were in common use in aviation. A direct carryover from the sailing terms, the port side, or left side when facing forwards, was traditionally the side of a ship that would be placed against the wharf or dock when in port. The ship would be loaded over the left boards, becoming laid board, from the Anglo-Saxon term laid, to load, giving us the modern term laden. This became the word larboard, meaning left or port side of the boat. Boats docked on the port side, usually because the steering oar was generally attached to the other side. Again, from the Anglo-Saxon, the side oar or steerboard, literally meaning the side on which a vessel is steered, became starboard, rhyming with larboard. In the modern times of the 16th century, the confusion which arose when shouted over a strong wind and creaking timbers changed larboard into port, hence port and starboard. By the mid-1800s, the term had stuck and was in common use around the world. It was only after I'd been flying for some years that the modern terms of left and right gained traction. While I'm on this subject, a little historical knowledge can help even in today's modern flying, as the left side of the aircraft is the port side. Left and port both have 4 letters, and port is coloured red, the colour of the left side navigation lights. By the way, should you ever be lucky enough to enjoy a formal dinner, when the after-dinner adult beverage is port, the decanter will traditionally be passed to the left and continue to pass around the table so everyone gets a glass, except when the Bishop of Norwich attended a formal meal at Christ's College, Cambridge, in 1785 because he hogged the port. Nothing was said, but when the bishop stood at his lectern the next day to preach his sermon, a note had been attached which read, "The Bishop of Norwich is fond of his port. Too fond, for the villain won't pass when he ought." To this day, should you allow the port to linger, you might well be asked, "Do you know the Bishop of Norwich?" Those aware of the tradition treat this as a reminder to move the decanter along, while those who don't are told, "He's a terribly good chap, but he always forgets to pass the port." When Captain Jeff welcomes you aboard his Mad Dog, he is referring to the boarding of a vessel, when one would cross the side, known as the board. This comes from a number of sources: the Old English board with no A, the Proto-Germanic word bodza, which itself comes from the Old Saxon board, again with no A, and the Dutch boord with 2 O's. There's a bit of Old Norse and Old High German in there as well, including a bit of medieval Latin or Frankish, and from thence it came over with the Normans to mingle with its native cousins. By now, it has inextricably tangled together. By the way, If you're interested in going back even further, there's a similar word in Sanskrit. Our aircraft's manifest is a direct carryover from a ship's record of cargo, passengers, and crew given to customs and other port officials. It comes from the Latin manus, meaning hand, and festus, meaning clear, evident, proved, clearly revealed. So it became a document or public declaration that would be handed over to reveal the contents of a ship, or in our case, aircraft. When I ring back to speak to some of my cabin crew, we'll get onto those terms soon, I'll be greeted on the interphone with a chirpy, "Galley 4, Tracy here." The galleys on our flying machines began with the Greek word gallia, thence the medieval Latin gallia, into the Old French word galley, all of which were used to describe a slave ship and became associated with the hot working environment of a ship's kitchen. There is little doubt that today's cabin crew would agree with the presumed origin, as they often call the crew member given the task of working in the galley to cook and plate up food as the galley slave. Our cabin crew are those crew members who don't work in the cockpit, and their title is derived from late Middle English, itself from the Old French cruer, meaning augmentation or increase, which was the feminine past participle of croistra, grow, from the Latin crescia. There is no doubt that you'll need to forgive me for my appalling pronunciations, as there's no doubt that Old French and Latin are not my forte. The original sense of the word was a band of soldiers serving as reinforcements. Hence, by the late 16th century, it came to denote any organized armed band, or generally a company of people. To become cabin crew, our motley organized band of flight attendants have to work in the cabin. The late Latin term capana was the start of our little cabin story, which became the provincial word cabana and then into Old French cabane before morphing into the Middle English cabin we know. Traditionally, it referred to a small hut, which adequately described something like a mad dog, but perhaps it's a little unfair to refer to the A380 as having a cabin. Shouldn't it be called the palace area instead? When used as a verb, the dictionary quotes an example of usage as the cabined and confined lives of the poor, perhaps suitable for low-cost carriers. We all know that the most important person on an aircraft is actually the chief cabin crew, or manager, or chief flight attendant, etc. They are often called the purser, which is a term also stolen from the Navy. The naval purser is a warrant officer, the origins of whom can be traced back to King Edward the Confessor in 1040. A purser would purchase his warrant from the Admiralty and would then be allowed to become a middleman between the ship and the suppliers in port. They would buy supplies on behalf of the ship, making a small profit in lieu of pay, almost acting as a private merchant. In charge of items such as food, drink, clothing, bedding, candles, the purser was originally known as the clerk of bursar. Of course, the captain of a ship or aircraft have their origins back in Latin with the term caput. Doesn't that sound amazingly like the German word caput, but spelt with a C and not a K, meaning broken and useless, no longer effective? I digress. From the Latin caput, meaning head, we get the late Latin capitanus, meaning chief, followed by the capitan, Old French, through to the Old English captain, meaning leader. However, I feel that there are plenty out there who might feel that the old German caput would be better suited to some. The captain and first officer are also the pilots. In other words, one who steers. Our steely-eyed pilots start off life as a Greek pedon, meaning steering oar, which itself is related to pous, of genitive podus for foot. From the Greek pedon, we get the medieval Greek pedotus, which refers to the rudder helmsman. The old Italian pilotto, Italian pilot, and then the Middle French version, pilote, which emerged in 1510 as the one who steers the ship, finally gives us the English pilot. The one thing that all these people recorded on our manifest, looked after by the crew and piloted by the captain need, is a plane to fly on. That word is simple enough in its origins, starting with the Latin planum, for a flat surface, the adjective of which is planus, adopted by the French as plain. It refers more to the verb, the act of moving a flat or level surface, which is lifted by water or air, and has now become the noun plane. Aeroplane, though, is similar but comes from slightly different roots. Those of the Greek, planos, meaning wandering, and aero, meaning air. Whereas Captain Al might be accused of wandering air, it was the French who merged them into their current meaning in 1855 to give wings to a word, which means a heavier-than-air-powered flying vehicle with fixed wings. Now that we have a machine to fly, we need to be able to trim it out. The Old English word trimmen or trimian meant to make firm or arrange, and seems to be the origin of trim. The word's history is obscure, but the current verb seems to date from the early 16th century, when its usage became frequent and served many purposes. In nautical terms, it refers to trimming the sails to make them an efficient shape, so that the tailtails, strings of yarn on each side of the luff of the head sail and on the leech of the mainsail, fly smoothly. If the tailtails are flopping around, the sail is poorly trimmed. Trimming also refers to balancing the center of gravity by positioning the cargo so that the ship lies evenly in the water. Much of this also applies to aircraft. We trim so that we don't have to continually deflect the flight controls, which is tiring and creates more drag on the aircraft, and we trim the center of gravity by positioning cargo and on some types moving fuel around as well. There are, of course, many terms that I haven't covered that are particular to aviation that have come from earlier times, and here are just a few. A beam, azimuth, ballast, bar, although I suspect that my usage has more to do with a drinking establishment than a mass of sand. Bilge, bulk cargo, cabotage, centerline, chock, coaming, compass, course, crab, dead ahead, fin, great circle, leg, bearing, the old man, pier, pitch, plot, propeller, first officer, sponson, stow, touch and go, waypoint, yaw, and on my aircraft at least, 3 sheets to the wind. Finally, to go for a Burton. There are several explanations for the origin of this informal British phrase. None of them have been proved to be the definitive etymology, although it's agreed that the phrase can be traced back to the RAF slang of World War II. It means to be killed when referring to an aviator, or to be ruined or destroyed when referring about a person or thing. He went for a Burton over France last year. My laptop's gone for a Burton. But what exactly is a Burton, and why did going for one gain these meanings? Let's look at the 2 main theories, both of which demonstrate the black humor often needed to deal with the fact that World War II aviators were highly likely to be killed in action. The English town of Burton-upon-Trent, from whence the long-suffering Mrs. Old Pilot hails, is known for its brewing industry, and a Burton came to refer to a type of ale. When an aviator crashed into the sea, otherwise known as the drink, the idea was that the person had gone for a pint of beer. There was a famous firm of tailors called Montague Burton. If an airman went for a Burton, he'd died and gone to be fitted for a wooden suit, referring, of course, to his coffin. But I guess we'll never know for sure.
I just love that kind of stuff.
I think we're all word nerds here, right?
I think
Yeah,
so.
I think so. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you for doing that. That's I'm sure you could have done another, 45 minutes, couple of hours.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could just keep going on and on and on.
Yeah, you didn't you did mention 3 sheets to the wind. I'm not sure why you applied it with is that the way you fly the airplane? But I learned many years ago. It was one of those books about words and where the origins, etymology of the word, and it was as you say, a sailing. Trying to think of the word, but that if the sheets, I guess, are in the wind, that means they're not tied down, so they're not helping. And I guess the sheets are the sails that steer the boat.
Yeah,
So
if you have one of those big 3 masters and you wanted to sit dead in the water, you needed to release at least 3 sheets. So and let 3 sets of sails flap around and go into wind, and then you'd stop. So and
I heard. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I heard that would make the boat kind of just like wander and like
Yeah, it would.
swim.
Well,
It'd just
yeah,
be
either the boat would wander or the
with the
sails would
currents
flap
or-
around, all of which resembled a drunken sailor. Yes.
Love that. 3 sheets to the wind. Interesting. I didn't know that much about the cockpit origin. I knew it was the coxswain, but some other good stuff you threw in there as well. Wow.
Yeah, well, most people seem to think it refers to fighting cocks, which is just an assumption. There's no basis behind that. But no, the coxswain is the naval version, and we get most of our terms from the Navy. So there you go.
Where'd you get all that information? That is so awesome.
Oh, if you pick around the internet, it's amazing how many people have put a lot of effort into discovering that, and there's some great etymology sites where you can find out all about insects.
Entomology.
Yes.
Oh,
one of
right,
my
okay.
favorites is the etymology dictionary. That's one of the ones I like to go to.
I can get lost in that stuff. It's just a black hole on the internet. You get sucked into it for hours and hours.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a book in our toilet, one of those classic toilet books, and it's
You should take it out of the
called,
toilet. It's going to get wet.
Yeah, probably should. It's called White Elephants and Red Herrings, and it's all about the basis of a lot of those phrases, and so many of them have come from the Navy. It's quite remarkable.
Very cool. Thank you for doing that. That was a great one.
Anyway.
I mean, they're all great, but anyway. Okay. Well, I think that we shall move on then. Kind of sticking with that same thing that we were talking about earlier regarding flight training, whether it be military or accelerated training from like the ATP style 141 school. Daniel has a question. He says, "Hey, APG crew, my name is Daniel S. I live in Colorado and train out of Rocky Mountain Regional Airport, which is Kilo Bravo Juliet Charlie. I'm currently a private pilot with a check ride scheduled for the 18th of December. I also have a question for you guys. My intentions are to work for the airlines. Which licenses and ratings should I take and in what order? I'm definitely not planning to be an instructor for my lack of ability to teach." Oh, must be hard to get along with. How would I build time and what sorts of jobs can I get with a commercial license with minimal hours? Thanks, clear skies and tailwinds for all. Steph, I think maybe you'd be the best to...
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some logical order and progression with ratings. The way I did mine, and there are other ways to do it, but private pilot, instrument, commercial, multi-engine, seaplane was thrown in there too, but that's certainly just that was the for fun one.
Yeah.
I think most people do it in a similar order, mixing up sometimes the commercial versus instrument versus multi-engine component just based on what your goals are. What type of job can you get if you don't want to be an instructor? Well, that's a good question. And there are actually plenty of jobs out there. Um, i- you know, Common ones that don't require quite as many hours or hours in more complex aircraft include things like being a survey pilot. Frequently, they fly Cessna 172s or 206s, things that are a little less complex from an insurance hours requirement. You can be you can fly skydivers, you can do pipeline patrol, you can do, oh my gosh, there's kind of endless things that are commercial in nature but don't involve flying passengers from point A to point B.
Banner towing.
Banner towing, agricultural type stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm missing a bunch there, I'm sure.
Pipeline.
But
I think you
I
already
said
mentioned that,
pipeline.
didn't you? Yeah.
Aerial photography type stuff, sightseeing tours sometimes fall into that category because they're not.
Herding cattle.
I guess.
That's an interesting use for
Maybe in
aircraft.
Australia.
Well, there you go. In
Yeah.
Australia, they
Yeah.
use aircraft for herding cattle.
I've heard of using helicopters, but not airplanes. That's interesting.
Sure.
Oh, well, I'm guessing they use airplanes. I've seen them use helicopters mainly, but
Yeah, someone does bring up the good point that the reason a lot of people do their instrument before their commercial is because those hours then count towards the minimum required for the commercial as well. So that's a logical step there, and any good flight school can guide you along with that as well if you're thinking of going through multiple ratings and not just stopping at your private pilot certificate if you're going to work towards an airline pilot career.
I was trying to think of what, how practical it would be to go from private to commercial without the instrument, because
It's not, because a lot of jobs are going to want you to have that instrument rating.
yeah.
So
It seems like the order that Steph mentioned is the normal thing that I
Yeah,
hear.
that's what most people do. That's what I've seen in most cases. I can think of a couple people who've done it out of order, but it was more just because they didn't have specific career goals, or they had a specific thing they wanted to do that did not require the instrument certificate. I know one person in particular who just wanted to be a pilot on the weekends for a skydiving operation who did not get his instrument certificate. Just didn't want to have to go through the hassle of the knowledge test and everything else. But I will say, in my personal opinion, I think that's the most important rating that you can do. There's a lot of good safety information there. It will make you a much safer pilot if you have your instrument rating, no matter what you do.
Excellent. I see
No,
Michael Cochran in the chat room. I'm glad he's here because we have some feedback from him. It's
Oh,
quite
excellent.
interesting.
No, I was going to say that instrument rating is really so important. It's one of the highest causes of GA accidents in America. Is people who get themselves into poor weather and with no way of knowing how to get out of it and how to fix
Right.
it. The problem
And disorientation is a real thing if you're not trained to fly.
Absolutely,
relying on your instruments.
Yeah.
I mean, I get disoriented every flight, actually.
That's what your first officer's for.
Well, yeah, they have to keep leading you to the front end, do they?
Yeah, no, sir.
The captain's in the back of the airplane again.
It's like, I'll just sit here and have a drink.
Can't tell you how many times I hear, I have the airplane again.
Flight ferrying, aircraft ferrying. That's another good one. Thank you, Hillel. Like I said, I knew I was missing a couple in there. But yeah, there's plenty of different job opportunities. There are many ways to get to your minimum hour requirements for your ATP, your airline transport requirements, before you can take that testing and certification. So it's really down to your imagination and what you want to do and what your priorities are.
Absolutely.
Plenty of good information out there on different pilot forums, pilot groups, even on like Facebook or things like that, in terms of people who are looking for jobs, have similar questions, are offering jobs, looking for pilots. So don't be afraid to dig into some of those resources on the internet these days.
And we have a lot of resources that listen to the show. I know personally 2-3 survey pilots and now a regional airline pilot who built up his hours flying survey airplanes. So
it can be done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You don't have to be a teacher.
No, not everyone. No two people are going to take the same path because everyone has different passions, different goals, different abilities and aptitudes.
That is so true. Hey, you know what?
I'm with you, Daniel. I don't really ever want to be a flight instructor.
No patience, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just more the I want to do it for the knowledge portion of it for myself.
Yeah.
But I don't really have any burning desire to teach primary flight students. That
many
sounds
times
like
do
a
I have to
terrible,
not to do that?
a terrible job for me. I could probably do, instrument teaching and.
You know what? I think you'd be a good instructor, actually.
Yeah, but it has more to do with the drive and the want to do it.
Yeah, true.
So I understand.
Hey, you know what? I think it's time for this week's installment of The Adventures of Ivor and Tarquin. Dear doctors and captains, as you may be aware, I'm midway through a tour of the west side of your little old country. America has many things to recommend it. Friendly people, warm Californian weather, too warm, sadly, at the moment, a variety of deep-fried foods overtaking on both sides of the person driving down the middle of the highway. But its biggest plus point is that I won't run into that toffee-nosed twit Tarquin. Hurrah. First of all, I'll make a confession. We flew here in a Boeing, some sort of modernish version of a 707, but with fewer. I'm sorry. First of all, I'll make a confession. We flew here in a Boeing, some sort of modernish version of a 707, but with fewer engines. Not inspiring, but nonetheless, it managed to chug its way across the pond. I must not be too harsh on it. It had wings, wheels, and restrooms, the whole 9 yards. Well done, Boeing. Next, I must critique your airport and arrivals procedures. Well, bugger me springs to mind. You have these fancy auto machines that read your passport, check your fingerprints, and then offer a full optical checkup, and they work. Previously, this all had to be done with the help of one of those human things. I'd assumed that the machines were installed to get rid of those pesky, expensive employees, but no, none of it. After queuing like we were at Disneyland for a faintly disappointing ride, the machine printed out a receipt, and what do we do with that? Get in another line to see a human. A bit of stamping and uncomfortable eye contact, and we're off. A huge success. One long line turned into 2 long lines. Still, we are safely in the USA. Next step, get to the airport hotel. Mrs. Ivor, the lovely Kirsty, I believe, said, sod it to waiting for the free shuttle bus. Let's get a cab. So we did. It took us to the wrong hotel, took our $19, and drove off swiftly. It did begin with the same letter, but it was a very different word after the first letter. I guess he's comparing it to the word sod that was used earlier in this paragraph. After this, things perked up. We got to the hotel with the right name. It had a view of aircraft on approach to LAX, and we slept well. That was day 1. But never fear, luckily for you, less detail is required for the next days. We've been to Monterey, San Jose, and LA. Very nice, they are indeed. But now we're in that concrete and neon hellhole, Las Vegas, just to watch a hockey game, then out to civilization again. Anywho, as the great Homer Simpson once said, we will press on with this great American adventure. We've learned many things, such as traffic lights are just advisory, the same with speed limits. Freeway entrances can be hidden out of sight of normal people. Food should be deep fried if possible. Chips are crisps. And rocket is arugula. It takes all sorts. So now that I'm older and wiser, I should that be older and more tired, I'll wish you farewell. And thank you for putting up with me and your country. And as you suffer Nick on a regular basis, on reflection, it should be poor old America. Chocolate biscuits and marshmallows, Ivor. Thank you, Ivor. Now, I've never heard of rocket. What is rocket?
It's arugula.
But I've never heard arugula referred to as rocket.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it.
Wow. I mean, I'm sure you have. Obviously, Ivor saw it. Just like,
I think.
Yeah.
That.
If you want to buy it in this country, you'll need to ask for some rocket.
I would never ask for rocket because I'd think they would think I was out of my mind.
I wouldn't remember to.
Why do I want to go?
Where's the arugula? Why does your arugula have this strange name affixed to it?
That's really weird. Maybe it's just me.
And then I'd remember. Oh, yeah, that's what it's called here.
Well, you would like calling things differently over there, just to be different.
Oh, no,
I mean, your peppers all have strange names.
I know the crisps thing and the potato chips, and your chips are actually potato chunks, and
Fries
chips are
and
crisps,
who
and
knows?
yeah, I
It's
know.
all so confusing. Why?
Courgette for zucchini and aubergine for
Aubergine.
eggplant.
That is the aubergine is the official
Aubergine.
color.
No, it's not aubergine. It's aubergine.
Aubergine. It's
Sorry.
aubergine.
Whatever.
I know this because our official company color that they put on everything is aubergine.
Are you wearing
Oh,
an
really?
aubergine shirt?
This is not aubergine. This
Oh.
is pink.
Okay.
I actually got rid of my aubergine fleece mostly because it was old. And this year I managed to get one that was not aubergine, but black. Much more flattering.
Yes, Liz.
Yeah.
Auburn Bergine for Jeff. Yeah, Auburn. Or I guess Nick would
Their
call
colors
it
are
Auburn.
nowhere.
Auburn.
Would I?
Yeah.
I think
you
you're
would.
putting words in my mouth.
I am. Gosh darn it, I'm going to put words in your mouth. Whether you
Yeah,
like it or not.
you're in charge of the edit, so I have no say in this matter.
Whether you want it or not.
Linguistic episode, apparently.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that was a mostly positive critique of the United States.
I think I pretty much agree with everything he said.
I do too.
And
Especially this
sadly, particularly with the problems he had in the airport, it's no different getting back into the UK. I mean, when he comes home, he's going to have exactly the same problems.
Now, you know what? I was listening to a show. A guy comes on, I think it's called Johnny Jet, and he always recommends an application, a website, that kind of thing. And one of the applications he recommended was Mobile Passport. And so I downloaded it, and I don't fly internationally very often, but the couple of times that I've used this Mobile Passport app, it has really made a difference. I've skipped the long line. Maybe it's the first long line. And it ended up going through a separate line and then just getting to the actual really, real human person much faster than if I had stayed in that first long line. So that's something to
Almost
look into.
comparable to global entry in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
in
and it's
terms
free.
of the speed that you get through, and it is free. You just have to fill it out. You fill it out
Within 4 hours, I think, of
getting to the airport. Correct. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it works for, like if you're British, if it goes the other direction or not.
I don't know if it's only for U.S. citizens.
Probably
but
just going into the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. But I thought it was so cool. It's free, and it actually it helps. That's amazing. And I think it's sponsored by the government, which is even more amazing.
Although it's definitely very much like the government to split one long line into two long lines.
That's true.
And
Very
call
much.
it more efficient. Have a good chuckle at that one. Thank you, Ivor.
Yes, thank you, Ivor. Very, very good. And did you like his new theme music?
I did. That was perfect.
I mean,
Is it also Tarquin's theme music?
Yes, it's both of them.
Okay,
It's
good.
The Adventures of Ivor and Tarquin. Until I
Lovely.
can come up with something better.
No, it's perfect. Keep it.
All right. Reagan sent us some audio feedback, and let's hear what he has to say.
Hello, Captain Jeff and the APG crew. This is Reagan from Northern California, city of Chico, California. I've been a listener since the mid-hundreds and really enjoy the show. Thanks for all the work that you put into making that every week. My feedback today is about a book I just finished, which I found on the APG library, entitled 35 Miles from Shore. For those of you that haven't read the book, it's about a DC-9 that ditched in the water off of St. Croix in 1970. 23 people lost their lives and 40 survived. One thing that I really enjoyed about this book was it is written with enough detail for pilots to follow along with the decisions that were made on this DC-9 and see how, after a bunch of miscalculations and mistakes, all it took was a faulty fuel gauge to break the camel's back and they had to ditch. Captain Jeff, you all often talk of the Swiss cheese model and how it takes a series of problems and poor decisions to line up for an accident to happen. Well, this book illustrated very clearly, I thought, what the holes in the Swiss cheese were this day and how they all just started lining up one after another, pointing right to a ditching that happened here. As I was reading this book, a question came to mind that I'm hoping you can answer. Ultimately, the DC-9 on this crash ditched due to fuel starvation. The pilots had previously tried 3 approaches at their primary destination of St. Martin before deciding to divert. And while they had been watching their fuel gauges during their landing attempts, it was during the diversion to their alternate that it was noticed that the fuel totalizer was malfunctioning. By this time, however, there just wasn't enough fuel in their tanks to get them to their alternate. My question for you today is, how do you ensure that your fuel instrumentation is in fact giving you correct data, and what is your confidence in your fuel instrumentation? In GA, my instructors have always taught me to plan off of a timer and use the gauge as a backup, which is kind of funny because during my IFR training, all I'm told to do is trust the instruments. But I'm also flying with one engine and a needle for a fuel gauge. So I guess the question comes down to, after you've made 2 go-arounds in crummy weather, what fuel data are you relying on to know whether you can make a 3rd try like ALM 980 did, or if you need to head to your alternate? Thanks for a great show, and Kavu to you.
Well, thank you. I heard crickets in the background, I think.
I know. I thought you were playing the crickets.
I wasn't.
Okay.
He was playing his own crickets. It wasn't me, Reagan. I didn't do it. He must have been outside or something.
Natural crickets. What do you know?
Real crickets in Chico, California. Chico is a wonderful place. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. And as would my beer,
Yeah.
Ultra from Sierra Nevada,
Sierra
Chico,
Nevada.
California, and Mills River, North Carolina.
There you go. So thank you for the feedback, Reagan. I have read, it's a wonderful book, and we've talked about it on the show before, by Emilio Corsetti III, and it's called 35 Miles from Shore. I highly recommend it. And if it's not in the APG library, Tiffany, we need to put that in there.
It is. He said he got it from the library.
Oh, never mind. Well,
that's where he found it.
Okay, never mind then.
So proof that people are using the APG library.
I
Thank
love
you.
it. I love it.
Tiffany.
Yeah, so the Swiss cheese model, I'm going to have to get like a model of, it looks like
We need some
Swiss
Swiss cheese. Yeah.
With a mouse stuck through it.
Yeah, somebody has one of those. Send it to me. Just kidding. The question that he had for me was the fuel gauges, and are we to trust them, and how do we know that what we're looking at on our gauges is actually accurate? And I can tell you what we do at Acme on my airplane and all the airplanes that I've flown is that we have individual gauges for the individual tanks, and then we have something called a totalizer, which totals up all the separate tanks in the airplane that I fly. Is pretty simple. We just have a left wing, right wing, and center tank, which is the same setup, I believe, as the DC-9 had in this accident, the ALM Flight 980. And what we do is we have a flight plan that tells us what kind of fuel we should have at certain points in our flight plan, and then we compare it with what we actually have when we cross that point. If it's different, especially if it's less or a lot less, then we start looking into other ways to verify what kind of fuel state we have at the time. We also have some gauges that monitor how much fuel is used. So if we know what we had to begin with, and then we subtract what these gauges are telling us as far as the fuel used, then we can come up with a rough idea of what the fuel should be. You made a good point. It's kind of ironic that, you trust your instruments, because when you're talking about your flight instruments, you definitely need to trust your instruments. When it comes to fuel gauges, I'm not sure if they have the same high standard of accuracy. But the gauges that we have on all the airplanes I've flown for commercial airlines have always been very accurate. And
I'll say in GA aircraft, when you just have the little needle gauge without any additional supplements to help you figure out your actual totals, it is accurate when the tanks are empty and it reads 0.
So is that actually a real fact?
I don't know. That's what I've heard from so many people. I'm just repeating it at this point.
Yeah.
I've taken it as gospel and I've moved on. But
I've heard that
it
too,
makes
and
good sense.
yeah, I think that might be true.
I have in fact flown one GA aircraft where I forget which tank it was. It was a low wing Piper product, so you had to switch tanks as you're flying along because it doesn't drain from overhead. Pull my headphone out of my ear there.
Don't pull your ear off.
No, it's okay. It's all good.
Okay.
It's reattached. And you have to change your switch your fuel tanks there so that you use fuel evenly from both sides throughout the course of your flight, and don't run out of fuel all the way on one side before you realize you have to switch over to the other tank. And there was a fuel gauge that did not read correctly for a long time during the end of the flight, a disconcerting amount of time. It was basically reading empty, and we knew for certain it was not on empty from previous flights, from previous history with the aircraft. So it was not very accurate. And there we were using more of a time-based method to determine our fuel remaining.
Right. And, if you know what the flow rate is, how many gallons per hour the engine normally burns, I mean, it gives you a pretty good approximation.
We were certain we were not leaking fuel, causing it to
Yeah.
drain more quickly than usual.
The number one piece of advice I can give to you, though, if you're flying GA, is always physically check the fuel level in your wing tanks, because
Look, if you can see into the fuel tank, look at it there. A lot of times you can see it when it comes up to the little tabs installed, so you can know how much fuel is in there if you fill it up to the tabs versus filling it all the way. If it's a high wing aircraft, you can get up on a step stool, or sometimes you can climb up on the aircraft, unscrew that cap, look in. If it's filled to the top, you'll be able to see it. If it's not, you can use a measuring stick or other device to see where it's at.
And I said this so many times before, when I was a teenager, I was a line boy or lineman. And one of my jobs was at John Wayne Airport before it got to be a big commercial airport. It was a very, very busy GA airport. And one of my jobs was to go out and pretty much spend the day fueling airplanes. And a lot of times I'd be putting fuel in airplanes and watching people come out, drive up, park, get into the airplane.
Never check it.
Never check the fuel.
Oh
and just go. And I'm thinking, that is not smart.
Not smart at all. Make sure that cap's on too, if nothing else. Good grief. If someone else fueled your aircraft, even if you fueled it, go back and double check that it's on.
Right.
And
Especially
secure.
if I fueled it, you definitely make sure that those caps are on properly. Anyway.
Now, here's interesting, because when I started flying our aircraft, they were fairly new. And the detection system for measuring the fuel in the tanks on the aircraft was not particularly accurate. And it took them some years to start producing a fuel gauging system that didn't have a fair amount of errors in. So what we used to do was do a physical check of the fuel in the tanks. Now, an aircraft like the A340, where the wings are a long way above your head, very hard, but every tank on the Airbus, and the same with your aircraft, Jeff, but they have built-in dipsticks.
Yeah.
And they're attached to, they're magnetic, they're attached to a float. And when you pull them down, they hang just below the wing and they indicate the contents of the tanks. And they did a physical check of these. Even though it wasn't hugely accurate, it used to give you a confidence check. And we would always, at every fuel check, we would do two fuel calculations, one based on the fuel that was indicated in the tanks against our fuel we expected now to consume for the rest of the flight, and the other based on the fuel we had used. So we would compare those two, and we would always take the most pessimistic as being the actual fuel, even though, of course, as the fuel tanks get lower, the fuel contents is usually indicated more accurately compared with the fuel used, which the longer the flight, eventually errors creep into those fuel used counters. After 10 or 12 hours, they're just measuring the fuel going through. They're bound to build up an error that grows towards the end of the flight. And even though, of course, it only took them a short while to sort out those problems, and the fuel gauging has been excellent ever since. Even now, we still do double fuel checks, both on fuel used and fuel indicated on every fuel check.
Which is very prudent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do check those little dipstick things when you're in flight, though. That's the tricky part.
Oh, yeah, you need a very powerful torch and peer out the window.
Okay.
No, it's actually one of the walk-around checks to make sure they've all been pushed back in again.
So that's one of the alternative fueling methods that we have. If we have a fuel gauge that's inoperative, one of the things that the fueler can do is do those sticks. And then there's in the nose wheel well, you have to open the nose wheel well doors, and you get in there, and there's like a plumb bob that you use and a like a chart that you see what kind of, because it depends on if the airplane's not on a perfectly flat plane.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Absolutely, yes.
Take
have
into
to-
account
You have to make adjustments to
grade
the
of
what
the
you see in the
pavement.
stick.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have to fire up the inertials, and when everything's aligned, we can use data from those to indicate the aircraft level.
Now the trick with the if they're sticking it and using that little plumb bob thing, we have to make sure that we do like an extra exterior inspection to make sure that those nose wheel doors are actually in the closed position. Because if they leave them open and we go taxiing off and take off and we put the gear handle up, guess what? They're not going to close.
Yeah.
And it's very noisy and not good.
And
Another gotcha.
embarrassing, slightly.
Yeah, a little embarrassing.
Jennifer says her car's fuel gauge is a stick.
Yeah.
Her little
She has
MG
a
she
a
has.
very old car.
Yeah, it's a lovely old car. I mean,
It is.
it's a classic fighter pilot's car. Jen, you should sell it to a fighter pilot like me.
Absolutely. Margie or Pip. I think Pip might be interested in it.
Pip's interested in stealing it. I'm not so sure about purchasing it.
I'm willing to pay good money for it.
I'd go with Captain Anderson's offer as opposed to Pip's. All right. Let's see. So thanks, Reagan, for the question and the promotion of the APG library.
Yeah, great.
The librarian, our wonderful Tiffany. I'm going to skip to item 16 because that gentleman, Michael Cochran, is in the chat room and he sent us some audio feedback. So let's take a listen.
Howdy, APG crew. I just want some clarification on the discussion of operating VFR and some of the required equipment that was discussed on episode 347. Captain Dane implied, at least the way I took it, that to legally operate VFR, one has to have VFR charts on board.
We don't, and that's what I'm saying is that to be able to navigate legally as a VFR student, you would have to have a sectional chart or a WAC chart or a terminal chart to be able to navigate, and we don't have that ability.
I'm not sure what a student has to do with it, but I'll assume that he misspoke when he said student. I am sure we are all familiar with the acronym ARROW, ARROW, which stands for Airworthiness Certificate, Registration, Radio Station License for International Flights, Operating Handbook, and Weight and Balance, which are the required documents needed to be aboard the aircraft. And we all know that we need to carry our pilot's license, photo ID, and medical certificate. And to operate an aircraft VFR, the required equipment is an airspeed indicator, altimeter, tachometer, oil pressure gauge, oil temperature gauge, fuel gauge, anti-collision light, seatbelt, and ELT. I do not know of, and I cannot find a regulation that requires VFR charts to be aboard the aircraft when operating VFR. I'm not saying that it is prudent, but I cannot find a regulation requiring it outside 901.503 subsection A, which has to do with large and turbojet powered aircraft. Am I wrong on this? And if so, can you provide a specific FAR that requires VFR charts to be aboard the aircraft when operating VFR? Thanks, and keep up the great work.
Well, I had a communication with Dana regarding your feedback, Michael, and he said, you're wrong. No, actually, he didn't say that. He said that you're right. And what he meant to say was that it would be a very prudent thing to have the sectionals available to you if you're navigating VFR, but it's not an actual absolute requirement to have them. So he apologizes if he gave that impression. But that was a good reminder of all the actual requirements. And I guess for VFR flying, there aren't a heck of a lot of requirements, are there, Steph?
Not a whole lot. I think, so I was just looking as well to double check on that, but
Uh-huh.
under FAR 91.503, there's a reference to having prudent aeronautical charts or pertinent aeronautical charts available. But actually that's a subpart of large and turbine powered multi-engine airplanes and fractional ownership. So, yeah, something large, something burning Jet A, something over 12,500 pounds. Pertinent aeronautical charts are part of the FARs. I
But
don't
if you're
see
out there in
anything
your
for
172, you
No,
don't really
you
have
don't.
to.
You don't have to have charts.
Yeah.
Probably not a good idea,
No.
but
I mean, you
even
don't
if you're
have to
just
have a radio
doing
either, right?
you don't have to have a radio. Nope.
I mean, there are some places where you have to have it, but there are plenty of places out there in the U.S. that you can fly around without a radio.
Yep.
Is it a
You
very
probably get away with the Michelin Guide.
what? Oh yeah, the Michelin Guide that should be in there, right?
Absolutely. That's required. Definitely.
You know what? Thank you, Mike, by the way, for sending that in. And and Mike says he chatted with Dana too, and he provided a great link, an AOPA.org publications link. So if I remember, I'll put that in the show notes. I probably
That
won't.
might be the same one that I'm looking at right now from AOPA.
But Michael also sent us some other audio feedback, more recent than that one I just played, and I don't really know how to describe this except that I just need to I need to play this. And HR, please keep a keen ear on this one.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I take umbrage with your safety assessment of the lovely flying machine, the helicopter.
You know, that thing stops rotating. You're going nothing but straight down. And with an airplane, at least you can glide. I have a chance to glide someplace. I don't care about the auto rotation, anything. You know, at the very least, you're going to be 3 inches shorter when you hit with auto rotation. So I'm not a fan of helicopters. Never have been and never will be.
No, an airplane that when you take your hand some feet off the controls just becomes uncontrollable. It just has no natural stability at all. Terrifies me.
Yeah. I agree with you, Nick.
The helicopter is a perfectly safe aircraft when flown properly and all the emergency procedures are complied with. In fact, I believe it's safer than a plane. Aside from a catastrophic failure, such as losing the Jesus nut, the nut that holds the rotor system to the hub, or flinging the blade off. If that happens, then you're just done, like if a wing falls off a plane. Why is it safer, you ask? Because if a helicopter loses an engine or has a tail rotor failure, you can just auto-rotate to the ground. And no, Dana, you'll not be 3 inches shorter if done properly. I've done probably 100 or so my past career during recurrent training, and I'm still 5'10", just like I started many years ago. And the aircraft came out without a scratch every single time. I may be a little bit heavier now. That is definitely not due to autos. Now, auto rotations, I just need a teeny tiny piece of open land to put the helicopter down on, say 200 feet if I'm having a bad day. And when I'm touched down, I'm only going 5 to 10 knots. If you're over a dense forest, no problem. Just come over to the top of the trees, bring your airspeed to 0, and let the branches catch you on the way down. Yeah, the helicopter's going to be trashed, but the landing will be survivable. Now compare that to your big old plane, Captain Nick. You need, as President Trump would say, that's right. You're going to need a huge piece of concrete to land on. That's for you, you old curmudgeon. And if the force is your only option, you're just going to wipe out the whole thing, and it's going to be ugly. You're landing at what? 130, 140 knots compared to a helicopter at 5 to 10 knots? Oh, and the more modern helicopters have a stability augmentation system where you can let go of the controls and it'll stay upright, kind of like the roll mode control on your autopilot on the airplane. All EMS helicopters that flew were outfitted with that nice piece of kit. A lot of helicopter accidents are due to CFIT, and that is due to pilots making stupid decisions, pushing weather, and ending up inadvertent IMC. And that's a lot less forgiving in a helicopter as compared to a plane. especially those without stability augmentation system. So in the end, if I had to make an unscheduled landing, especially at an unapproved area, I personally would rather do it in a helicopter than in a plane.
So, Michael, I'd like to thank you again for these great Yeti mugs that you gave all the crew members.
Oh,
I'm seeing
yeah.
mine right now.
They're very nice.
In my mug store.
So,
Sounds like there's a little bit of a debate here.
Yeah, let's get that first thing out of the way. Stability. I said natural stability. If you need a computer to make your airplane stable, and that's from a bloke who actually flies an airplane that is full of computers, then yeah, you got a problem. But turn all my computers off and the airplane's not going to fall out the sky. It'll fly.
well, unless
I'm
you're
just-
on
I'm
an
just
Embraer
thinking-
190.
Right.
Yeah, well, possibly. He has a point. You can auto-rotate a helicopter into a small patch, a cabbage patch or something, which is probably where it belongs, but only if you start off at a sufficient height. And if you're flying a helicopter, what's the point of bumbling around at a decent height? You want to be flying around, nap of the earth stuff. Otherwise, get yourself a decent flying machine. And if you're starting off at less than 1,500 feet or so, you've got no height to get the rotors powered up or spinning at a sufficient speed to cushion that landing, in which case you will be 3 inches shorter or perhaps more.
HR.
I'm going to remain neutral on this one and say that both camps have valid points.
And you'll note that in that little audio excerpt, you didn't hear my voice saying anything bad about it. I wasn't dissing the helicopters.
I did not diss the helicopters. I think I made, I was able to come up with a term for the collective when someone was
Yeah, that's
struggling
true. You
to
did.
remember what that was called. I think I got that correct. Mike did not write in to correct me on that one.
Yeah,
so I'm
Michael
assuming
is
I was
a
correct.
helicopter pilot. He was a law enforcement helicopter pilot at one point, and now he's doing EMS, which is an amazing thing. I mean, the job that those guys
that
do is amazing. So
But you didn't mention how goddamn noisy they are too. I mean,
They
for
are
heaven's sake. I mean, they vibrate, they're noisy, they're uncomfortable.
All right, it's time for us to move on to the next item in feedback.
Thank you, Mike, for the lovely feedback. We always appreciate
Mugs, great mugs. Thank you very much.
the corrections and
The mugs are
commentary.
much nicer than the helicopters.
Yeah,
We'll send Nick's back for his lack of appreciation of the.
We're going to reprimand the offending crew members, behind the
I
scenes.
like it way too much.
Okay. I know we're getting close to the end here, but I would like to play this one from Wayne, 9.
Hi, APG community. Actually, this is a message for Jeff. Jeff, I was just curious. First of all, my name is Wayne Barter, longtime listener since about the mid 200s. Love the show, love the podcast. I did want to take a moment to tell you how I got turned on to you guys, and it was for my first podcast that I listened to was by a guy named Joe DeEon, and he was a Acme captain. His podcast took him through from his right seat move to the left, and he did a lot of great podcasts that I really got hooked for the aviation community. I travel for work on planes every week, so it was really nice to be able to listen to his podcast while in flight, busying up that time and for my long drive. And then he just kind of fell off the map. I'm not sure what happened, why he stopped recording. I know he's done pieces with NPR. He's just it was a super cool introduction to the podcast community. And anyways, while in my search and my failed search to find him to see what he was still doing today, it's when I got hooked up with you guys, searching generically for Airline podcasts and came across, and I haven't looked back since. But I just got to thinking, boy, wouldn't it be cool if you actually knew Joe and, maybe have him on the show. He was such a great storyteller. He has a great voice. I think he had started to make a move from the um, audio side of things, podcasting, and move to video. And I know he had a couple episodes on YouTube. So I'm thinking maybe he was trying to monetize his efforts to keep him going, and maybe that never came to be, or came to fruition. But with your guys popularity and the community that you guys have built, if you are ever in the search for a great talented podcaster to add as a guest or another co-host of the show, I personally would vote that you reach out and have a conversation with Joe just to see if he could complement your already awesome team. Just a suggestion. I'm not looking for this to get played on the podcast or anything, but it's something I wanted to share with you. Huge fan of the show. Love what you guys do. I can't wait, every week until the next episode's out. Keep up the great show. And just wanted to pass along that question to see if maybe yourself and Joe had ever crossed paths. I don't think he flew the MD series, so I'm not sure that you would have, but you never know. It is a small aviation community, and just let me know what you think. Thanks so much. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Wayne. And your feedback is perfectly timed because we're going to have a couple vacancies here soon on the APG crew. So maybe Joe Dion would be the guy to go for, right? No, I'm just kidding. No comment from you, Captain Nick?
Am I being relieved of my...
Just kidding.
Just put out to pasture. That's all.
Yeah.
No. So I love Joe Dion. Well, not real. I mean, he's a great guy. Well, I don't know him personally. So to answer the first part of the question, no, I've never crossed paths with Joe, but I did listen to and subscribe to his podcast, and I loved it. And it was very, it really dealt a lot more with things like related to stuff happening in the cabin of the airplane and layovers and that kind of stuff. It wasn't as operationally oriented as our show is, but I still loved it. And he had the perfect NPR style. And as you mentioned, he was also a what do you call it? A guest host on a lot of NPR shows when it came something to do with aviation and that kind of thing. In fact, the last or the only thing that I was able to find after you sent me this feedback, Wayne, because I went in to see if I could still find some of his episodes, was his appearance on an interview by the Amateur Traveler, I believe. I'll try to remember to get that link in the show notes so you can listen to Joe. But this was back many, many, many years ago. And as you said, he started to get in he started doing some live shows and video, a couple of them. And then all of a sudden he was off the map. And I don't know, I was wondering at the time whether it had something to do with the fact, because he did not hide who he flew for, his real airline. Now, I always use the fictional airline Acme, but you all know if you do a search, there's no Acme airline. That's a virtual airline. And he would be a lot of times using or doing interviews while he was in the cockpit in flight, recording things. And I always thought, he's kind of really hanging it out there, I think. Now, I don't know if that has anything to do with it. If somebody from the company said, hey, sorry, you can't do this anymore. You're breaking too many rules, whatever. I don't know. Or maybe he just got tired of doing the show, because it is a lot of work, I can tell you. As all of us here, our host can tell you, it is a big commitment and it's a lot of work. And he did the podcast called Fly With Me. And it's kind of an aside here. It's kind of frustrating sometimes when you go to iTunes and you look at the aviation podcast and you see the listing of, like, new and noteworthy, and then what's hot and that kind of thing. And so many times you see Joe Dion's Fly With Me podcast, but his last podcast was in 2010. So almost 9 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And So I looked to see where he was on Twitter, and his last tweet he made was in November of 2011. And I know that I would listen to the show when Wayne was talking about the fact that he moved from left seat to right seat. He went to the 757, I believe, flying out of LAX. That's probably why I don't know him or have never run into him, because he's based in Los Angeles. And now I think I know this for sure because I have a way of finding out this information through my company connections. He's a 737 captain based in Los Angeles. Now, Liz is telling me through our private communications channel that I should look at
Yes,
something.
Micah said that he had some contact with that podcaster and that he overwhelmed in the end. Perhaps is the best.
He
way
was
to put it.
overwhelmed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overwhelmed and sounds like burnt out a little bit from doing it.
Yeah, I can see
Got
that.
too intense.
It's easy to be overwhelmed and get burnt out as a podcaster, especially if you're doing a show like we do every single week, and you have like a regular life and a work life and everything else. It's a lot of work, but we keep doing it because we love getting together. We're good friends, and it's to me, it's like getting together with friends every week to talk about mostly aviation stuff, but we talk about other stuff as well. And then of course we extend that into our real lives and get to do these meetups and everything else. And that's just so amazing. We have such a great community.
There's been a good balance, I would say.
Yeah, I think so too. But again, I loved Joe Dionne's Fly With Me podcast. I never tried, when I started podcasting, I never intended to do a show that was the same kind of show that Joe did, because I think his kind of stood alone. It was like nobody could really do what he was doing. And I was hoping to be able to give you a link to listen to all of his shows. Unfortunately, I cannot find any active links. I mean, all the links that I can find, you click on them and it says it's a dead link.
Can
So
you still listen on iTunes?
No,
Really?
not available. It's on iTunes, and if you go to
But
the
it's not
listing,
available to listen to
and
the
you click
episode.
on it, nothing happens.
Interesting.
So one of the important things as podcasters is to kind of own your audio files, and then go with a company that is a reputable company like the one that we use, Liberated Syndication, Libsyn, and you'll know that they're always going to be there, even if you're not doing the show anymore. So 10 years from now, if we stop doing the show, these files are still going to be there as long as Liberated Syndication is going to be there, and I think they will be. So
Will live forever on the internet.
yeah. So it's kind of sad, actually, because I loved what he was doing. Did any of you ever hear Joe?
I think
in his
a
show?
long time ago I listened to a couple of his episodes, but I don't recall details.
Never heard of him.
He was really, really good. And you can get an idea of his voice and his style by listening to the Amateur Traveler show, episode 75 or 72 or something like that. I'll try to get the link to that particular, that wasn't his podcast. It was a separate podcast. I'm hoping that he is enjoying life and doing what he wants to do. And hey, Joe, I doubt that he's listening to our show, but if you are, contact me, feedback at Airline Pilot Guy or Jeff at airlinepilotguy.com, and we'll have you on, and then you can tell us what's been going on with you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There we go. I think that's going to be it. I know we're over 3 hours again. We do appreciate your pardon when it comes to these long shows, but we always try to do as much as we can in our limited amount of time that we have every week to do this. And all the ones that we weren't able to get to on this show will move to the next. And let's see, Nick, again, you want to remind us of the meetup you have scheduled in Berlin for the end of the month?
Absolutely. It's at the Circus Brewery, which is in Berlin, and Tillman. It's I guess, part of the hotel that he runs there, the Circus Hotel and the Circus Hostel. I think it's probably in the hostel. Am I right?
It
Steph?
is. If you go into the main entrance of the hostel, it's actually downstairs to the left of the reception.
And the hostel's a different place to the
They're
hotel.
across the street from each other. The hotel's on I think it's the south side. I don't know. Well, the hotel's on one side of the street, the hostel's on the other side of the street.
Are they just like really rude at that place?
Very hostile.
Oh,
hostile.
okay.
Jeff's
Well-
never spent any time in hostels, apparently, as a young traveler.
So that's on the 27th, Tuesday, the 27th of this month, and probably be kicking off around 7 o'clock, but basically the evening of. That'll be nice. Looking forward to it. And my lady wife will be there.
Oh, awesome.
Wonderful.
She's a wonderful person.
Mm-hmm. Say
So
hello
I
to her for me.
I've noticed in the video. What did you say?
Nothing.
I heard that.
Move on. Move on.
And so I
HR
see
here
this,
is all
if watching the video here, I'm seeing in the frame, Nick has cleverly put a display of the time, the local time where he is, to make me feel really bad that it's 1 o'clock in the morning right now.
Yeah, just turned 1 a.m.
15 November. So thanks for doing that for us, Nick. You're a great guy. We're going to keep you, man. Don't worry.
Yeah, we're actually not going to let you retire, at least not from the show.
Yeah, you may retire from flying airplanes, but you're not going to retire from doing podcasts.
Contractually, you have to stay with us forever.
Yes.
Oh, damn. Can I leave with a pay increase?
Yeah, we'll talk.
We'll double it.
We'll double it. Triple it.
Again?
Yeah.
Wow.
Must be like the 20th
Very
time we've
gen-
doubled
yeah,
your pay.
very generous.
It's a very lucrative business to be in, that's for sure. Hey, if you want to learn more about the show, head over to airlinepilotguy.com. And if you want to download the app for your smart device, your smartphone or tablet, you can find an application, Airline Pilot Guy, on both the iOS and Android platforms, ad-free and free. And we're also on social media.
We are. Check us out on Twitter. At APG Crew is the handle you can use to find us in the community. Our individual Twitter information is pinned to the top of that page. You can also head over to facebook.com/airlinepilotguy and interact with the community there, find information about meetups sometimes, articles that the community members are interested in and want to share with others, and feel free to post there and share information as well.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to find, where is the thing I play for Hillel?
Hillel's lost in your bathroom.
Hillel, where are you, man?
Someone flashed him.
Where did it go?
He's with the book in your toilet, Nick.
Well, I don't know.
That is so weird. Every week I look at this.
In the toilet this week. Isn't it cohabiting with Roger?
Yes.
That's not it. Oh, it's right. It's right below the one I just pushed. Okay.
APG listeners, please join
Oh,
us on our Slack.
I should do this.
team. Slack is a community.
We're also on Slack. We have a Slack team there, hosted by Hillel, and he's going to tell us about how you can join us there.
APG listeners, please join us on our Slack team. Slack is a communication, coordination, and sharing platform that works on your mobile, laptop, or browser. On Slack, we share ideas and news. We suggest episode and Playing Tales topics. We plan events and meetups. To get into the Slack team, please email me at slack@airlinepilotguy.com. That's SLACK, Sierra Lima Alpha Charlie Kilo at airlinepilotguy.com. Or send me a tweet with your preferred email address to @Hillel, and I'll send you an invitation. That's Hillel, spelled HI11E1, Hotel India 11 Echo 1. And see you in Slack.
Thanks, Hillel. Now go back to the bathroom. And until we meet again, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care, and God bless.
Cheers, y'all.
Good night, Pop.
I'm not going to push that now because that would be maybe mistaken for saying something bad about your dad.
Oh, no.
Well, play it now then.
It's actually a reflection on me, actually.
What is that bloke saying?
You're an idiot.
You're an idiot.
Oh, is
You're
that
an
what-
idiot. So it's like a scene where he is like, there's a reverberation or reflection of sound, and he's saying these things, and he's kind of enjoying hearing his own voice come back to him, and then he goes, "I'm an idiot," and then the reflection comes back, "You're an idiot," and then he just gives us a look like,
Oh.
huh?
Huh?
Anyway.
The Lockheed TriStar.
Ooh.
That's from one of those old promotional videos.
Mhm.
A quick question from the
Yes,
chat
sir.
room. Owen, I am staying overnight at Loughborough after my talk. I don't know where we're eating. The organisers have booked a meal. I don't know whether it's a restaurant or a bar, but whatever. I'll be available after the chat, I'm sure, to say hello. Yeah, and Hillel correctly identifies the reflection of noise as an echo.
That's the word.
Wait, were you struggling to come up with the word? Did I miss?
Apparently. Yes.
Okay. I guess I just assumed that you had said it because.
No, this happens a lot with me.
Okay. Apparently, I was.
I'm going to be 60
not
years
paying
old.
attention to the conversation.
I'm going.
And that's where it all falls apart, doesn't it?
There's a word that I want, but it's not there.
I
Yeah,
have
it's
that
called
trouble
an
already.
echo. Thank you, Hillel. Smart ass.
Yeah.
Go back to the toilet.
Yeah, get back to the toilet. Jerk. Oh, well, thank you for staying up so late, Nick.
Not at all. Not at all. It's fine. I've got tomorrow relatively free. I've got to just run through the questions I'm going to ask Sir Richard, because Nev and I are meeting up at this gentleman's pad the day after on Friday to talk about his book, which is a thing for PT UK I'm doing. And then I've got the weekend to just sort out my chat for Loughborough, so that'll be fun.
Very nice. I was looking through our current show folder here, and I'm thinking, dang, we did get all of them done on today's show.
Oh, excellent. Well done.
Well, we didn't, because
No.
Liz has already moved the ones that we didn't do to the next.
What, feedback?
Oh, she's
Yeah.
quick.
No, we skipped 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
We skipped 10 through 15.
Well, we did 16, and there's also a 17.
Yeah.
10, 11, 12, 13,
Oh, yeah,
14,
that's
15,
true.
17.
Yeah, so there were six that we didn't get to, and they're all great.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I've got to try and find time to get the next plane tail. I'm desperately hoping that NATS, National Air Traffic Service, will allow me to use Adam's.
Start
They still
badgering
haven't
them.
gotten back with you?
Just,
No,
you know,
still waiting. Their PR
start
department to do their.
poking them. Hey,
If there's anyone listening,
Hey.
get back to Adam and say yes. Silly people.
Hey.
Yeah?
No, just Nets. Hey.
Hey,
Yes.
come on. We're trying to do a show here.
No.
You're not helping. Yeah, Adam's been doing a lot of traveling lately, I think.
Mm-hmm. He'll be here in the U.S. next week.
Oh, wow. Where?
Florida, Ohio, and passing through Charlotte.
Florida, Ohio, and passing through Charlotte. Oh, are you going to get to see Adam?
Hopefully.
Oh, neat.
Briefly. Maybe for
Cool.
some Bojangles.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The Bojangles rendezvous.
Yes. Or maybe something more sensible, like Starbucks.
There's a Bojangles in our airport in Atlanta.
Is there really now?
Yeah. Oh, it has been for quite some time. Yeah.
Well,
Good
there
stuff.
you go.
Good stuff.
Kind of.
Well, it's not bad.
It's okay.
Well, the
I feel like-
Bojangles in the Atlanta airport is not bad.
You know what? I really like their French fries with the seasoning on it.
I don't think I've had their French fries. I
Ooh,
usually
the
have their
French fries are good.
breakfast offerings.
Breakfast is good too, but the French
Their
fries are.
The biscuits are
Mhm.
wonderful.
Yes, I will
And,
agree with that also.
I usually get the ham and egg biscuit.
Mhm.
I haven't been doing that much lately because I used to do all those early LaGuardia flights that leave at like 6:30 in the morning, and that was like one of the only places that was
And
open.
now no LaGuardia.
Yeah, and they leave. They all left from the T concourse, which was very convenient for me coming in on MARTA.
Mhm.
I didn't have to go to any of the other concourses, and I'd always go by Bojangles and get my country ham and egg.
That's what it is.
Bojangles.
Bojangles.
There you go.
Yeah. So, yeah. Hey, I know it's late, Nick. So let's go ahead and stop the broadcast.
Oh, don't worry.
Thank everybody for hanging out with us. Weren't too many glitches on this one, so that's good.
No, I think it was smooth.
Missed you in Beeham last time, Jeff. I'll try to get with you next. Are you in Birmingham now, Mike? I thought you were up somewhere in the northern portion of the country. I didn't realize you were in Birmingham.
Alabama.
Birmingham. Yeah, it's not Birmingham. It's Birmingham. Alabama.
Emphasis on the ham. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Well, there you
go. Yeah. Okay.
Who
went to
wrote
the
the song,
citation? Oh,
Mike?
cool. You're not flying those whirlybirds anymore, huh?
No, I don't know. Who did write the song Main Man Maker?
Which song were we talking about?
Mr.
Oh,
Bojangles.
Mr. Bojangles.
Jerry Jeff Walker. There you go.
Bojangles. Oh, dance. Right? Is that right?
I have no idea. I'm not familiar with the song.
Jerry
Really?
Jeff Walker. Who's the hell is Jerry?
I would play it, but then YouTube is going to send me a nasty message, so I'm not going to do that. That's why, by the way, your introductory that I used to have the doctor in the beginning of it.
Can't do that anymore.
Yeah, they're sending me nasty grams again.
What a bunch of party poopers.
I know. So I thought, okay, that's fine. Stick it up your nose, because I have a piece of audio that is perfectly fine for me to use. There's no copyright until Nev tells me that he has a copyright on it, and now he's going to sue me.
Yeah,
he's still have an express agreement, I think.
Waiting until it becomes lucrative enough for him to do that. He's going to slap them all.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for hanging out with us tonight, and we'll see you.
Brilliant.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, stay night. Thanks tonight, Pop.